John Kennedy, and I'm blessed to be here.
Member Madison,
Here.
Member Masuda,
Here.
Member Rivas,
Here.
Member Williams. Here. Wilson,
Here.
Mayor Gordo.
Here,
We have a quorum.
echoing Mr. Hampton's comments on behalf of all of us. And with that, as we all know, we lost a friend and colleague over the last, it's been what, almost 2 weeks now, and Pasadena is mourned, and we'll have more that Pasadena is mourned, and we'll continue to mourn. We'll have more to say about that in just a moment. But I did connect with Mr. Kennedy's family and asked that, or provided the opportunity for um, two members of the Kennedy family to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Can we bring on Chris Morey, who is Mr. Kennedy's nephew, and Jonathan Kennedy, also a nephew. Are they? Yes. Christopher Morey. Okay. Okay. Oh, Chris and Christopher. If they will, we're waiting for them to. Chris? Christopher, you on? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm here.
Okay.
John, are you there? Jonathan? Well, I just wanted to say thank you to the council members and the mayor for having us and allowing us to commence with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, and thank you for honoring us. If we'll all stand, and Christopher, on behalf of Council Member John Kennedy, will lead us in, and Mr. Kennedy's family will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes, please. If you can place your right hand over your heart, and we will begin. States of America, for which it stands, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, and Jonathan, thank you also for joining us. Jonathan, if you'd like to unmute. Oh, it's not him. Okay, it's a different Jonathan. Okay. Thank you, Christopher.
No problem. Again, thank you for having us. We just wanted to just say something in his honor, and we really appreciate it from the family.
Well, know that John, and you'll hear more from each of my colleagues, is someone that we miss, that we as a council and as a community loved, because he loved Pasadena. And so we want to pass that on behalf of all members of the city council and residents of Pasadena. And his contributions are many and everlasting.
Thank you. I agree. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll move into the ceremonial part of our meeting. And as we said, the past few weeks has been devastating to Pasadena and to our city council. We continue to grieve the sudden loss of Councilmember Kennedy on July 21st. And to say it's been a somber couple of weeks for us in Pasadena would not do it justice. Anyone in our community who was fortunate enough to have a conversation with John Kennedy knows how deeply he cared for the city, for the residents of this city. He was born and raised in Pasadena. As he often loved to remind us, and we loved him reminding us, he was the eighth of 10 kids. And from an early age, he devoted his life's work to strengthening our community and helping to make it a better place for all. I've been fortunate to serve along with John, as many of you have. Um, Actually, all of us have, but I was fortunate, as a few of us have, to serve on this council since John was first elected in 2013. Councilmember Kennedy consistently exuded compassion, intellect, integrity, and thoughtfulness. Councilmember Kennedy was charismatic, and his love of people and community drove him to achieve great things throughout his life in service to Pasadena. Though he was ill, that did not keep John from doing what he loved, helping to make positive, forward-driven, and impactful changes to our city, and creating a better Pasadena for all, not just for those of us that are here now, but for the benefit of future generations of Pasadenans. In recent weeks, Councilmember Kennedy attended and spoke at several milestone events in District 3, including the groundbreaking for the Pasadena Recreation Swimming Center at Robinson Park. You'll all recall that that was near and dear to him. And also the Heritage Square apartments, which will provide 70 units of affordable housing for homeless seniors. And again, another project that John advocated for, fought for, and that we have struggled to make a reality for a number of decades. And under his leadership and advocacy, that's now happening. Um, and John, as many of you who were present the day that we celebrated the groundbreaking, was very, very proud of that moment and the progress. John also recently attended the unveiling of another important project that he was very passionate and influential about. That's the historic monument at 100 West Walnut, which recognizes Pasadena's diverse history and honors families and businesses that were displaced by urbanization during the 1960s and 70s. John, as we all know, understood the importance of history, learning from past mistakes, and that together we could and can move forward to a better, more unified future, as he loved to say, and I'll put this in quotes, one Pasadena. From spontaneous gatherings of the community to at the steps of City Hall when we learned of John's passing, to the outpouring of grief, and the number of inquiries we've received regarding the timing of his memorial service. It's evident to me and to all of us that John's reach in our community was far and wide. And actually, inquiries are coming in from far beyond Pasadena's borders. And that he positively impacted the lives of many, many people, personally and collectively. He had a very positive impact on all of us. A public, and just to touch on that, a public event to celebrate John Kennedy's life and legacy will be held in Centennial Square in front of City Hall on Friday, September 30th, with the service expected to be from 5 to 6:30, and a reception to follow from 6:30 to 8 p.m. We should also recognize that many have questions about how and when the vacant seat will be filled between now and the next election. I'd like everyone to know that we're actively thinking through the process, and more information will be forthcoming. As mayor, I can just say that I, like all of us in this room, will miss John Kennedy. It's been a pleasure working with him all these years for the betterment of our community. And I would like to thank him for his love of Pasadena and the people of Pasadena, and his selfless availability to everyone, whether it was us as individuals or us as a community, over so many decades. And no matter was ever too small to receive John's kind attention, sincere reflection, and constructive input. As I've said previously, John's life was in fact a life well lived. So this evening we will be adjourning our meeting in memory and in honor of Council Member and former Vice Mayor of Pasadena, John J. Kennedy, our friend and colleague. And to all of the Kennedy family, be assured that our hearts as residents of Pasadena, as colleagues and as friends, are with you during this difficult time. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to my colleagues. I see Mr. Masuda in the queue.
Thank you,
Oh.
Mayor. That was so well said. I first want to give my deepest condolences to the Kennedy family during these very difficult times. John's passing was quite shocking, and the whole city of Pasadena is grieving. John came on council 2 years after me in 2013 and was a fantastic council member. And he cared so much for his residents in District 3. He was so proud of being born and raised in Pasadena. He was a perfect choice to represent his district as a son of the city of Pasadena. John inspired his residents and cared about more affordable housing, parks, and he will always be remembered for promoting diversity in our city. I am very thankful and appreciate John's leadership and his determination. He never forgot his origin and his family. He gave his district hope and opportunity. He made a big difference in Pasadena and will always be remembered as a caring leader. I will always remember John and will miss his warm smile. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Mr. Masuda. Vice Mayor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor, and certainly I echo your thoughts and that of Councilmember Masuda. I did share a communication with the residents of District 7. I wanted to share a little of that with my colleagues and the public. It says, "Dear friends, progress can only be made when we commit to collaborating with partners who bring different perspectives and expand our worldview. I found such a partner with my colleague and friend John Kennedy, that we had vastly lived experience. We shared a common commitment to making our city better and creating one Pasadena. This honest and constructive alliance made us both better policymakers. So with the recent unexpected passing of John Kennedy, I lost not just a friend, but a colleague, but more importantly, a key partner who made me a better public servant. I know both our community and I will sorely miss him, notably his larger-than-life personality and his thundering voice. I'm so grateful for his passion and his energy, all directed to making our community better. His passing will indeed leave a critical void. I send my prayers to John and his family. but also thank him for his important contribution to our city and his invaluable partnership. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Madison.
Thank you, Mayor. I too want to extend my condolences to Jonathan and Christopher and the entire Kennedy family. And you know, I too count John as not just a colleague on the council, but also a friend. As you described, Mayor, John was deeply rooted in Pasadena and fiercely committed to the city and its residents, and especially, you know, working families, young people, the elderly, the underprivileged, you know, what the scriptures describe as the least of these. Those were always primary in John's mind and in his approach to being a council member. You know, John was known on a national scale. You know, just a couple of years ago, I stood in his bedroom, not quite believing that Joe Biden was going to walk in, and sure enough, he did. The now President of the United States was in John's living room, and John introduced me to him. John and I both love the Obamas, and I recently was watching a documentary. I think it may have been the HBO documentary on the Obama administration, In Pursuit of a More Perfect Union. And sure enough, there in the first row in the East Room at a small gathering was John Kennedy. And I immediately screenshotted the picture and texted it to him. Politically, I had differences with John from time to time, but we agreed on way more than we disagreed. And, you know, our disagreements were always left on the playing field, as it were. And I think this is true for all of us on this dais, that, you know, John never lost his sense of humor and of good spirit. And we would regularly text one another and call one another. And sometimes it'd be, you know, you really got me on that one, or you really showed me up on that decision. But again, always in good humor and good spirit. I learned a lot from John Kennedy, and he's left us way too soon. And you know, one of the most difficult things is that we didn't have a chance to say goodbye. You know, John is a young man, and the rapidity of his passing is a painful reminder that none of us knows whether we have another week or another 50 years here. And, you know, we shouldn't leave anything unsaid to those that we care about. One measure of, Mayor, as you described, a life well lived is leaving this place better after your time here than you found it. And I know for sure that that's true for John J. Kennedy and for Pasadena. And he was loved by many and will be greatly, greatly missed. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Madison. With that, oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Williams, and then Ms. Rivas.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to all my colleagues. I echo your sentiments, and I'm going to make this brief because it isn't that easy to talk about. But John, he wasn't just my partner in crime on the council when we'd have our decompression/yoga talks on Tuesday after the council meeting. He was also my partner in crime for estate sales. So we would go to those together and buy different things, and he would put my furniture in his truck and take it over to my place. He was that kind of friend who would just drop everything and really help you out. My dad was John's mentor when he was at the NAACP. And so that's how I first got to know John. And then we worked together for several years at Southern California Edison. So he was one of the first people that I met who was on the city council. An inspiration to me and one of the reasons why I ran. And since he was born and raised here, it wasn't about agreeing or disagreeing or being right. It was always about what was best for Pasadena. And you always knew that was where he was coming from. So even if you didn't agree with him, you had a respect for that, that he was in the right place. So say goodbye to you, my friend John. And I'll miss you at the council, and I'll miss you on the weekends at the state sales. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Councilmember Rivas?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to everyone for all of your comments. I, of course, share and echo all of them. I knew John for the shortest amount of time compared to the rest of our colleagues. But I'm so grateful, and I feel so lucky that I got to know him over the last year and a half. I got to know someone who cared deeply for others, someone who thought deeply about how to help the least of us, as he often said, and someone who committed himself to the service of our community. I really looked up to John, and I'm really going to miss working with him and learning from him. He was a busy guy, but he was always available to chat. And oftentimes while he was driving around in his truck, we'd have conversations. I could tell he was driving. I always really appreciated hearing his perspective and his experience. I learned a lot from him, especially as a new council member who had a lot to learn to get up to speed. So his loss really leaves a big hole on our council and in our city. And I, of course, want to extend my condolences to Jonathan and Christopher, who are here with us today, and the entire Kennedy family. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Rivas. Councilmember Hampton?
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry. You know, it's really hard to talk about John. I just, me and John are, it was more than just being on the city council together. When I first served as a youth member of the NAACP, I used to see John Kennedy's face on the wall as a president of the NAACP. And being the youngest picture up there, I think all of us that were youth members of the NAACP at the time, we aspired to know him. We heard great things about him. Come to find out, fast forward, some years earlier, I had met him a few times in my youth, as well as we, had the opportunity to talk while I was in high school. And then, as I ran for school board and city council, our families are very, very close. My aunt is John's godmother. My first cousin is John Kennedy's godson. So we have a really, really close family tie outside of being on the city council together. John Kennedy's always been my brother. I would always tell him, he would say, Tyrone, we're brothers. And I'd say, no, John, you more like an uncle to me. Just because of our age difference. And he would laugh about it every time. But I'm definitely going to miss John. But one thing is for certain is John will never be lost. John was the biggest believer in the reason why I have so much faith is because of all of the scripture and all of the things that he would share with me about his Savior, the Lord, and our Savior. And so I'm really happy that John is no longer suffering. I'm sad myself that I'm no longer able to lean on him for, conversations. We learned a lot from each other outside of, council, whether it be personal things or whether it be policy decisions. I was just thinking about, how close we were, that when I was having my second child, and actually my first child too, after I called my parents, John Kennedy was the first person I called. So I'm really, it's kind of, it's really hard for me to know that gonna miss a brother, miss a family member, and not only for me, but for the whole community of Pasadena. As you all mentioned, John was all about Pasadena. Pasadena was everything, John, not only did John, make Pasadena, think about Pasadena all the time. Wherever he went, he made Pasadena look well. He was always, whether country he was in, he was always representing Pasadena well. whether he was in Washington, D.C., as you mentioned, his connection to Joe Biden, our president. He made Pasadena look well. As our vice mayor, he served vice mayor role unlike any other. And I'm really going to miss him, but I know that he's going to live on through me and through the people that he has touched and the lives that he's been a part of. John Kennedy did not have children, but there are so many young people who looked up to him and aspired to be like him and aspired to make Pasadena, as you mentioned, Mayor, one Pasadena. Every Father's Day, I would text John and tell him Happy Father's Day. And he'd always text back to me the same thing. And he would say it was kind. And I would say, well, you fathered a lot of people. And so with that being said, I'm always an action person, and let's give our I wish I could have given more roses while he was here. I feel like we talked a lot, and I used to call him my Martin Luther King, or Pasadena Martin Luther King. But as we have named things after people throughout this city, I hope that we find whether it be Pasadena Park, whether it be the Heritage Square property, or the pools. I mean, you could name the things that John was super passionate about. He was even passionate about our water quality. So I hope that we, as a council, will always remember John J. Kennedy, and this city will remember his service through locations that they go to, or a place with his name that we know that John is up in heaven and he's advocating for the city of Pasadena right now for us. So, Mayor, I appreciate you. The Kennedy family, I love you, each and every one of you. And if there's ever anything, know that you guys are family to me, and you know that you're family to this whole city council. We miss John Kennedy a lot. Miss him a lot. You can't text him after this meeting. But I'm really blessed and honored to have been able to serve with him and alongside of him. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And as some of you pointed out, John's service to Pasadena started long before he became a member of the city council. I remember, I'm a little closer in your age, to his age than you are, Mr. Hampton, but I remember working with him in the early 90s when he was involved in community work, and I was at day one, and he then transitioned to what was then the community. I'm looking at Nick, the CDC, the Community Development Commission, as a member, and served our city in various capacities. And so since then, so again, we continue to mourn, but at the same time recognize John's great contributions, as well as his family's contributions. It's often said that the best gift we can give is the gift of friendship, and certainly the Kennedy family gave us a friend in John Kennedy, and I'd like to recognize a member of the Kennedy family, Jonathan Kennedy, to say a few words.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Kennedy. On behalf of the Kennedy family, we would like to express our sincere gratitude and appreciation to Mayor Victor Gordo and the city council members for the opportunity to honor Councilmember John J. Kennedy, the man we knew in the Kennedy family as a brother and as an uncle. Councilmember Kennedy lived an incredible life. He lived like there was no tomorrow. He lived a life well lived, and he loved his community with all of his heart. Above all, he was a man of God. And with that being said, I just want to again end that saying thank you, and we really appreciate you on behalf of the Kennedy family. Thank you.
Jonathan, thank you. And again, please accept the condolences. And I know I've been in touch with your family, but and I know that other members of the council have as well, but please accept our condolences on behalf of every member of the council and our families, and every resident and every family in Pasadena. And gratitude for, again, the Kennedy's family's gift of John Kennedy's friendship to all of us.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Thank you. And with that, at the end of the meeting, we will adjourn in honor of our friend, colleague, Councilmember John J. Kennedy. Okay, we will move on with the agenda and start with public comment for matters not on the agenda. And we have some pretty substantive, meaty issues this evening. And so in order to allow the council to get through its agenda, and we also have a number of public speaker cards for matters not on the agenda, and to allow as many as possible to speak before we begin our regular agenda, we will go to a minute and a half for matters not on the agenda. I believe we have over 18 cards
Yes.
submitted. Okay, so we'll try and get through as many as we can, offering a minute and a half. Anyone who would like more time, please indicate so, and we will move you to the back of to the public comment afterwards. But the first will be a minute and a half.
Before we commence, I'd like to make note, the public comment will be limited to a total of 20 minutes at the beginning of the meeting and will continue at the conclusion of the meeting. As noted by the mayor, comments are limited to 1.5 minutes per person, and the city council may not discuss or take action on issues not on the meeting agenda, except that members of the city council or staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed by persons exercising public testimony rights. And with that, we're going to commence with Michael Williams and proceed with Alan Shea and Olden Denham. Michael, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Michael, please commence. You have a minute and a half. Thank you.
First, I want to give my condolences again. I said it at the, but I haven't said publicly, for John Kennedy, who I had much respect for as a council member and as a person. And so it's very sad and just, and, you know, a heavy heart to hear that he had passed. With that being said, there is a lot of things that are going on here in the city of Pasadena, including Anthony McLean's case, which I always and will always advocate for the firing of those officers immediately, not to wait, not to prolong this any further, to remove those officers from duty. But the other thing is that we had another police shooting this weekend on Saturday of a man who apparently had a gun, but had it pointed at his head. And at the time he was shot, it appeared that his gun was pointed towards his head. Now, I don't know, and I'll be honest, I don't know what else might have happened in between him being shot and what happened, but there needs to be an immediately and quick investigation into the shooting. There also needs to be things put in place so that these kind of shootings don't continue to happen. Officers need to be retrained, or there needs to be something in place that doesn't allow them to just fire and shoot at people who are not immediate threats to them.
Michael, your time has concluded. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Alan Shea, who has not checked in. So we will, well, he has checked in. We'll give him a few
Hello?
seconds. Alan, yes, you have a minute and a
Yes.
half. Please begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Honorable Victor Gordo and City Council members. My condolences go out to the Kennedy family in the wake of his passing. I am going to reiterate to the City Council to our interim city manager that it's imperative that we do not close the administrative hearing prior to our new city manager coming into taking office, so that we can have a fresh set of eyes, because the DA's report was so inconsistent with the narrative that was put in the first one. And if you want specifics, we can provide it to you, that the body cams indicated that the officer that murdered Anthony McLean shows that he put on his gloves at 7:54. By 7:59, he's on the east side of the street picking up the gun that was brought in by Pasadena police. And by 8 o'clock, a third officer is now in play saying that he is in the area. And then at 8:03, another officer is in play saying that he's in the near area, that he didn't see it, but he's on his cell phone. And then at 8:05, in the DA's report, a new officer is the one who found it. That doesn't make
Mr.
any
Shea, your
sense.
time has concluded. Thank you. We'll move on to Odin Denham, followed by Ryan Bell, followed by Jane, I believe it's pronounced Panagotin. Odin, can you hear me? Sir? Sir, you have a minute and a half. Please begin.
Good afternoon, City Council, and all respect due to all of you. And I want to give all due respect to Mr. John Kennedy, because he was a good soldier, and we're truly going to miss him. But at the same time, we still have these prevailing problems in Pasadena that have to be dealt with. And I can, excuse me, I can only add a little to what Alan has said, because I've seen the footage myself, and the footage and the report are not consistent with each other. In fact, there's some outright lies in the report. It can be shown to anyone who's willing to sit down and look and see this. You don't have to say any more. Just look at the video, and that's what Attorney Crump said. Say no more. Just look at the video. And in fact, we have to deal with this problem because it's not going to go away. I want to give all due condolences to the to the Kennedy family, but at the same time, this work that I know he was involved with must continue, and we will seek justice. And I don't understand why we can't get this cop off the street. Even if he hadn't, even if the young man had done something, there's no justification for shooting someone in the back, running away. There was no aggressive move whatsoever, and anyone looking at the footage can see that. And I'm looking forward to the new administration coming in, but this problem with Anthony McLean is not
Sir,
resolved
your
yet.
time has
We need to
concluded.
continue to-
Thank you. Ryan? Ryan, can you hear me? You have a minute and a half, followed by Jane Panagotin, followed by Brittany Pollock. Ryan, you have a minute and a half. Please commence.
Thank you. Thank you, City Council, Mayor Gordo, for having my comment. I came here 2 weeks ago to tell you about a group of tenants who were being illegally evicted from their apartments. I think at that time I said it was 6 or 7 buildings. We've now identified 21 buildings, 2 of which are in South Pasadena, but the rest of them are in Pasadena, managed by 2 management companies, Helix Management Company and Family Management and Realty. The good news is that some of the tenants have received notices from their landlord indicating, after the tenants wrote to them and told them of their rights, and the tenants union backed them up, the landlords have written to some of the tenants saying that they are not required to leave after 60 days as they were originally told. But there's a large group of tenants that still haven't heard a word from their landlord, and they've even had their payment portal closed, so they cannot pay their rent on time. This is another way of taking away tenants' rights, to not even allow them to pay their rent and then come after them, accusing them of not paying rent. You're going to hear from some of those tenants in a few minutes, but I just wanted to indicate again that these are the types of tenant protections that we don't have in Pasadena. Luckily, we have the county's protections. But the city really needs to communicate clearly to the residents of the city what protections they have.
Sir,
and
your
speaking
time
with
has
the
concluded.
model.
So, Mr. Bell, thank you. We'll follow by Jane Panagodin. Jane, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, you have a minute and a half. Please commence.
Hi, I'm Jane. I volunteer on the Pasadena Tenants Union Crisis Hotline. About a month ago, right after the City Council sunset the Pasadena eviction moratorium on July 1st, we began receiving a very large volume of calls from Pasadena residents who had gotten notices to quit, saying that they had 60 days to leave their homes because the landlords intended to do substantial renovations. These notices from people in different buildings were really similar, so some of us looked into it further, and we discovered that all the buildings involved had the same two management companies, Helix and Family with a PH, and disguised, of course, by a web of LLCs, some combination of owners Mandy Wang, Tim Trout, and Victor Chan. Several of those people work together at real estate private equity firms. It's clear that they intend to flip the units and rent them out to the highest bidder while displacing long-term Pasadena residents of color. These actions are reprehensible enough, but on top of that, these evictions are actually illegal under the LA County COVID Tenant Protection Resolution, which does apply to Pasadena due to the COVID state of emergency and the expansion of county powers during this emergency. However, unlike other incorporated cities like Santa Monica and Long Beach who have alerted their citizens that these protections apply, Pasadena has decided that since it has sunsetted its local moratorium, it doesn't want or need to let its citizens know that they are in fact still protected by county law until December. We have case law from San Diego, a directive from the California Attorney General, and the opinion of several legal groups, including the Eviction Defense Network, Public Counsel, and LAFLA, that this law applies to Pasadena, but have heard nothing from the city. What I want to get across is the scale of the problem. These
All right, Jane, I'm sorry, but your time has concluded. Brittany, can you hear? Jane, I'm sorry, your time has concluded. Brittany, can you hear me? Brittany is next, followed by Julia, followed by Jolly. Brittany?
Thank you. Yeah.
Great, you have a minute and a half. Please commence.
Thanks. Sending my condolences to Councilmember Kennedy's family and loved ones. I'm calling this council today for accountability and action. Fire the officers that killed Anthony McLean. It's been almost 2 years since Anthony was murdered on August 15th, 2020. And there's been absolutely no accountability for the officers who've killed them. They haven't even been fired. They stole a man's life and they have not even been fired. The city council has ignored the community's continuous fight for justice in Anthony's name and the warnings that this would happen again. The police would kill. Pasadena police shot and killed a man this last weekend. There needs to be an open and transparent investigation into that shooting of Adam Mustafa Yunus. Police investigating themselves in these instances is absolutely ridiculous when they are the ones who stole a life from the community. This investigation needs to be open. You all should be pushing for that publicly. We need to have the ability to reimagine our future and want something other than this, other than murder and police hunting and constant grief. We're all in crisis. Why is Pasadena giving a total of almost $93 million to the Pasadena Police Department? That eats up 30% of the city's entire general fund. We're paying this institution 30% of the city's general funds, $1 out of every $3. Only 40 million went to housing.
Thank you, Brittany. Your time has concluded. I appreciate your comments, but your time has concluded. Thank you. Julia, followed by Jolly, followed by B. Rooney. Julia, can you hear me? Julia?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. You have a minute and a half. Please commence.
My name is Julia. I am a teacher here, and I am calling on behalf of having the officers who killed Anthony McLean be fired. We've been warning you about your police department, and you had another person killed this week. I continue to wonder what is going on in accountability of your police department. And this is, at the end of the day, your department to take care of. There is no one else. We continue to call in. It has been over 2 years since Anthony McLean has been killed, and we continue to push for transparent and open investigation into this new police murder of one of your constituents. So I really hope that something changes and maybe it takes another death for you to understand that this police department is set on murdering your constituents. But I'm so sad to hear about another one. And I continue to feel the need to tell you that that is on you. And I hope that you wise up to it, truly. I really, really do. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Jolly.
Hello?
Hi, Jolly. You have a minute and a half. Please commence.
Okay, I'm really sorry to hear about the Kennedys pass away. Have my condolence. I was living in the Pasadena since 1985, and I moved away in year 2000. But I still own property in the Pasadena for the last more than 30 years. And recently, I received a notification from fire department, and I tried to contact the fire department. I was being told I can only contact the inspector by email. So I already sent out 2 emails. I haven't got a response. And this letter was written July 16. I did not receive it until July 27. The stamp was July 25. So I was wondering, can somebody at the Pasadena Fire Department Fire Prevention Division, the last name is Henderson, to contact me? I also called Noreen Sullivan 6 times already. I haven't got a response from my district city council. I just try to ask for help. Please help me so we can get this thing solved. And my tenant, I have a long-term tenant more than 20 years. And
Hello, Jolly. I'm sorry, but your time has completed.
Jolly,
okay,
We have your information.
no, Jolly, if you can reach out to the city manager's office and excuse me, Mr. Masuda's office, they'll work together to get you a response. Thank you.
The next speaker is B. Rooney, followed by Benny Villalobos, followed by Hiram Cormier Jr.
Hello.
Hi, is this B?
Yes.
Hi, B. You have a minute and a half. Please commence.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm B. I'm in District 1 here in Pasadena. We know of at least 19 apartment buildings across our city of Pasadena that have been given illegal eviction notices to the entire complex. This is affecting more than 200 families. Many have already vacated their home because it was not made clear to them that these eviction notices are illegal. It's likely that many more people from other buildings that have not been identified and reached out to the tenants union have already left their homes and may face illegal evictions as well. The city of Pasadena needs to inform its residents that tenants are protected from no-fault eviction, including evictions to renovate under the LA County COVID Tenants Protection Resolution. Other charter cities have already put out such a statement. Publishing this statement, it really needs to happen. You should publish it on the city website, on the housing department's page, on the Housing Rights Center website, in the city newsletter, send a mailer to all Pasadena residents, tenants, and landlords alike, inform all city management and personnel that this is the case and that they are to advise constituents appropriately. Our city is hemorrhaging our community members, and it will continue to do so until everyone is informed, at the very least, that no-fault evictions are currently illegal under the LA County resolution through December 31st, 2022. And, fire some killer cops.
B,
Jeez.
your time has concluded. Thank you very much. We will now proceed with Benny Villalobos, followed by Hiram Cormier Jr. Yes, 6 minutes. It's calling down. Benny, please press *6. Benny Villalobos. If you do not respond, sir, we're going to have to move on to the next speaker. We've got 6 minutes and 40 seconds left on the time clock. Benny, we're going to go ahead and move on with Hiram Cormier Jr.
Can you
followed-
hear me?
Oh,
Hello.
okay. Is this Benny?
Yes, ma'am. This is Benny. Sorry, having technical difficulties.
No problem. Here we go. We go ahead. You have a minute and a half. Please commence.
All right. So to go on Ms. Jane and B's point, I am one of those tenants that are experiencing. I live on 190 South Marengo Avenue. We are currently being evicted, not only being harassed by the management company, but also by the construction workers who are demolishing the house around us. They're stealing our property. They're harassing us. They're talking rude to us. They're not being respectful. And we have other tenants here. We're just kind of showing some team. I got Miss Monique with me.
I'm also the tenant of 190 Marengo. I've been a Pasadena for a very long time. I've also seen a lot of people getting illegally evicted throughout my life, and something has to give. Now it's happening to me, and I'm almost 40 years old, and it's still happening to me. We're getting bullied. We're getting illegally evicted. Our property's falling apart. Not only with the demolition, but prior to that, I lived with mold. I had no sink. I have no water. I have no electricity. Something has to give.
Benny, and I'm sorry, ma'am, I missed your name. If you'll reach out to my office, we'll put you in touch.
I do apologize. I already spoke to the housing department.
Okay.
I had the fire department come in. I've had everything happen.
Ma'am, if you'll just send me an email and someone from my office will work with you to connect with staff.
I'll do so. Absolutely.
Thank you.
So much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Next, we'll proceed with Hiram Cormier Jr. and next, Jill Shook. Hiram, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Great. Yes. Please commence. You have a minute and a half.
For the gazillionth week in a row, I'm just calling to let you know that you need to fire the cops who killed Anthony McLean. Yeah, I send my condolences to, John Kennedy and his family and anybody who knew him or loved him. Death is something I feel for real, because that's something I've been through a lot, actually, I lost 3 relatives in March, and then I lost another one like 2 weeks ago. So yeah, that stuff is not easy. But there comes a certain point in time where everybody has to stand before God and answer for the things they did, and the actions they did or did not take in life. And you have to explain yourself. And I'm going to tell all of y'all, there's no explanation for what y'all have done in regards to Anthony McLean case and all this other police violence, the housing violence, the healthcare, whatever it is, system you want to name. There is no justification for it. And that's just the facts. So I'm just here to highlight that. And also, we know what happened. And when it comes to this most recent police murder out of the many slew of murders that Pasadena police have done, there is no such thing as a quote unquote justified killing. I don't have the time to get into why, but you know why. The system begets violence and begets.
Mr. Cormier, your time is up.
That type of stuff.
Thank you.
Fire the cops.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
We'll follow with Jill Shook, and the last speaker, we have enough time, we'll follow with Bert Newton. Jill, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
You have a minute and a half. Please commence.
Yes, I'm here today first to say we fully concur with the concerns of those being unlawfully evicted in Pasadena. Please put this on the city's website as well as the housing department. Also, I'm here to say a huge thank you for the unanimous vote for allowing the proper zoning of churches and commercial land for affordable housing. We've been talking about how much we appreciate you and each city council member ever since the vote. So we felt it only right to say this publicly to you. Second, I'm here to also make a public statement about our appreciation of John Kennedy. John loved his church and was inspired by his faith. So many of his beautiful and passionate pleas for affordable housing made reference to the least of these, as Steve Madison mentioned. And it's taken from the scripture of Matthew 25, a powerful chapter where Jesus speaks of the measure by which cities and all of us will ultimately be held accountable. So I just want to read briefly from that passage. It says this, that essentially all nations will be gathered in his presence, and he will separate the people as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will place the sheep on his right hand and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the
With all
creation.
due respect, Jill, your time is up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The next speaker and the last speaker for the first 20 minutes is Bert Newton. Bert,
Yes, good evening,
you have a minute and
Mayor.
a half. Please commence.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and City Council. I want to thank the council for voting for a pilot overlay zone 2 weeks ago for religious congregations to offer their land for affordable housing. I'm especially grateful for the advocacy of Jess Rivas and the guidance of Andy Wilson, who crafted a compromise that was able to get unanimous consent. That was excellent work on his part. And this was one of John Kennedy's last acts to vote for this ordinance. I do want to point out, however, that the price of the compromise was to perpetuate exclusionary zoning, something that John Kennedy expressed to us that he was not happy about. So certainly single-family zone neighborhoods are more diverse than they used to be. But the diversity of the more affluent single-family neighborhoods has not come because working class Black and brown families were able to move out of rental housing in Northwest Pasadena and into single-family homes in East Pasadena. No, many of those families have been displaced out to San Bernardino and Riverside. And according to the analysis of the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley, East Pasadena, as well as Linda Vista and other parts of southwestern Pasadena, remain highly segregated. The draft housing element states a goal of integrating affordable housing throughout the city, but the deal we came up with was specifically crafted not to do that. Again, I want to thank those on the council who made sure that we got something, and I'm glad the vote was unanimous, but I want to make sure we are all clear on what the price of that deal was. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are out of time, but there are 2 speakers left, and so I think it's fair to just allow the 2 remaining speakers at a minute and a half as well.
Yes, Nina, that will be Nina Chomsky, followed by Aaron Levy. Nina, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm happy to move to the end of the meeting for additional time.
Okay.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and put you back in the queue. Aaron Levy? Aaron, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. You have a minute and a half. Please commence.
Yeah, I'm here just to join in the calls for the city council to publicize widely that the county eviction protections do apply, and also to admonish the council, because one of the considerations that you made when sunsetting the local Pasadena moratoria was that people would still be protected by the county measures. And by failing to publicize that, by failing to, and in fact, various people, both from these buildings and also just from the wider community calling our hotline, have called with reports that the city representatives, when asked about the existence of moratoria that would apply to their cases, were given misleading information and in many cases wrong information, saying that the county protections did not apply, when in reality they do apply. Pasadena is still protected by these eviction moratoria. And yeah, it's irresponsible for the council to have sunsetted the local moratoria, knowing that this would happen, especially when the city of Pasadena is going to be able to vote this November on protections that would, among other things, allow tenants who are displaced by necessary renovations to return to their homes after the renovations and not be displaced from the city of Pasadena. And I think it's really sad that by this failure of public messaging and of policy, the city has and this council has effectively pushed out yet another round of tenants. And in this case, we see that landlords are noticing the sunsetting of those evictions.
Sir, your time has concluded. Thank you very much, and that concludes public comment. The first 20, we have one public speaker who's chosen to wait till the end of the meeting to give her comments. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the consent calendar. Are there questions or comments related to the consent calendar? Otherwise, we have one speaker on item 4. I'll accept a sweep motion on all items but item 4.
Mayor, I'd like to ask a question about item 7.
Okay, we'll hold item 7 and 4.
I'll move the balance, Mayor.
The balance of the consent calendar is moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Williams. Roll call.
For consent calendar, Councilmember Hampton,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
Yes.
Mayor Gordo,
Yes.
and that is consent calendar with exception of items 7 and 4. And before we move, I'd like to just report out that item 15, we received one letter in support of the recommendation to authorize the mayor to sign a letter to support AB 1766. Thank you.
Thank you. And item 4.
The speaker has not checked in. The speaker has not checked in for item 4. So if you'd like to
Mayor,
go
I
on
had
to.
a question if you don't mind, whether or not the speaker is available.
Yes, item 4.
Yeah, quick question on item 4. I can't tell
Okay.
if the police department folks are there, but I was just wondering if they could provide a little bit more detail on the $600,000, roughly $600,000 allocated to their department for under this item. It says it's going to be used for 3 different items, but it was unclear what the breakdown was. Is it mostly for the helicopter system? Is it mostly for the license plate readers? Just what was the rough breakdown there?
Yes, Councilmember, this is Commander Grisafi from the Police Department. There are the 3 items. The first one is the ALPR, which was $168,000 for that. The barriers for the vehicle incursions, cost of that was about $77,000. And then for the infrared camera for the helicopter, that was the majority of it for $460,000.
Got it. Thank you. That's really helpful. Could you also just go into a little bit more detail on the ALPRs? What additional equipment are you buying with this item?
These were part of the items that were purchased for terrorism mitigation for the Rose Bowl. Last year, the council approved 3 intersections to be outfitted with ALPRs. This was additional cameras that were to be set up to help secure the Rose Bowl egress and ingress into the Rose Bowl for events. It included additional cameras to cover 1 more intersection, as well as 4 what the company calls, or the company calls quick deployment cameras that we can put up on poles wherever we need them.
Got it. Thank you. So this is an item that we've previously discussed, essentially.
We had the discussion or approval last year for 3 intersections. This was additional cameras to be added.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Thank you. Was that the only that we did have a?
But they're not checked in.
They're not checked in. Okay. Is there a motion?
Move the staff recommendation.
Staff recommendation's been moved.
Second.
Seconded by moved by Mr. Madison, seconded by Ms. Williams. Roll call.
Before I read the roll call, I'd like to report out that we received the city clerk's office received 1 letter in opposition, opposing the acquisition or use of an automated license plate readers, ALPR. Thank you. So with that being said, roll call. Councilmember Hampton?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Mayor Gordo?
Yes.
Motion's approved.
Next, we will turn to item 7, which was held at the request of Mr. Madison.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a couple of sort of process questions about this item. The first question is, these 4 potential vendors for environmental quality, CEQA reports and the like, I think one or more of them has been used by the city in the past out of the planning
the Pasadena area. As Michael said, I'd like to encourage you to vote for this ordinance. I think what we are seeing currently going on in the news is yet another example, if we need it, of what is happening to our climate. We see huge wildfires going on all over the state, including one that just started this weekend and has become the biggest wildfire in the state this year. We are seeing flooding in Missouri, flooding in Kentucky. I was just watching something about the flooding in Kentucky. They found approximately 36 people drowned so far, and there will undoubtedly be more. We have heat domes over the Northeast. I mean, it's clear, I'm sure it's clear to everybody, the impact of the climate catastrophe that we have coming. There's something like 85 million people in the US right now that are under extreme heat warnings. So everything that we can do, both nationally and locally and in the state, to fight climate change is extremely important. That's why I want to strongly urge you to pass this ordinance. This will be part of Pasadena contributing to the overall fight against climate change. Thank you very much. That's all I had.
Thank you. We'll move on to Carl Selkin, followed by David Juarez. Carl? Carl Selkin, can you hear me? Sir,
Carl, if you'll unmute. Let's come back to.
Carl, we'll come back. We're going to move on to David Juarez, followed by Winston Thorne. David, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Great. You have 3 minutes. Please commence.
Thank you. Good evening, council members. My name is David Juarez with the California Restaurant Association. I am calling to thank city staff for their thoughtful approach to the building electrification ordinance. We believe this approach accomplishes what the city is setting out to do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions while taking into account the needs of businesses. Restaurants are still recovering from the pandemic and the related COVID-19 closures. That mandating them to replace and retrofit their entire operation would have been devastating. So again, thank you to David Reyes and his team for understanding the operational needs of the restaurant community and for crafting such a balanced ordinance. Thank you, council members.
Thank you, Mr. Juarez.
Thank you, sir. We'll follow up with that, Mr. Winston Thorne. Winston, can you hear me? No, so we'll go back to Carl Selkin. Carl, can you please unmute?
Mr. Selkin? Carl?
Well, that concludes public comment on the item.
Okay, motion's been offered by Ms. Williams. Roll call?
Councilmember Hampton?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Mayor Gordo?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good work to staff. Next, we'll move on to our final item on the agenda, item 19. Long time in coming, the RBOC presentation. We'll start by welcoming Steve Hatterline, President of the Rose Bowl Operating Company. Mr. Hatterline.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, Madam City Manager, senior members of city staff, members of the Pasadena community, Steve Hatterline, President of the Rose Bowl Operating Company. First off, I'd like to, on behalf of the Rose Bowl Operating Company, offer condolences to the Kennedy family. Pasadena lost a great champion. John was all about things Pasadena. I'm joined tonight, a couple other members of the RBOC team, Jens Wyden, General Manager and CEO, Mo Salama, Controller, George Cunningham, Chief Operations Officer, and Deedon Bronzino, Chief Development Officer. The Rose Bowl Operating Company returns to the council to assist in the deliberations of the council's, of the RBOC's 5-year pro forma and the recommendations that on how to address the shortfall. specifically recommendations to pursue 8 revenue opportunities as detailed in the June 6th staff report, and to direct the city manager and the Rose Bowl general manager to work together on these items, and to bring these back to the council quarterly. Similar reporting will occur at the RBOC board. We believe these revenue opportunities address the shortfall seen in the 5-year pro forma. In addition, Jens will provide updates on events that have occurred since the June 6th presentation to this council. Before I turn it over to Jens, I want to take a moment to thank Greg Goldman, whose resignation was accepted today. Greg served as UCLA's representative to the RBOC, and he was a valuable member of the board. I look forward to working with Peter Angelis, UCLA's new representative. I also want to thank Cynthia Kurtz for her efforts on behalf of the Rose Bowl and the Rose Bowl Operating Company. Meaningful progress has occurred in the last 6 months, and we thank you for your efforts, Cynthia. With that, I will turn the microphone over to RBOC CEO and General Manager Jens Weiden.
Mr. Wyden, welcome.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Mr. Mayor and Council. Thank you for having us today. Today, I'm going to play a little bit of quarterback and set up what we're going to talk about today. But just by way of framing, as you all probably remember, we were here June 6th and had CAA Icon and Dan Barrett and his team provide an overview of the strategic initiatives plan. But we really just got to the point where Council was able to briefly speak about it, and then we didn't really get into the details. So our plan today is to give a very brief 15-minute overview of the project, and then allow as much time as Council would like to discuss these 8 items as well as others. As a reminder, these 8 are a smaller list that came from a much larger sampling that the RBOC was able to get down to this number of 8. So we're happy to answer any questions about those 8, but also others. But before I hand it over to Dan, as we are coming to Council at least quarterly, if not more regularly, we also wanted to use this occasion to also update you on some things that have happened since we were last here. On the positive side, we've had some wonderful news at the RBOC. We received a $3 million grant from the state of California. Dean Brazino, who's here with our foundation, worked really, really hard with Chris Holden's office to get these funds that are going to go to unbelievably important work on our water and gas lines at the stadium that are close to 80 years old. So it's an amazing example of how this building doesn't just mean a lot to this city, it means a lot to the county and the state and the federal government. And our team did a very good job of going to Sacramento and getting those monies. We've also had a very exciting announcement about UCLA football, who will be joining the Big Ten. Anything that's good for our tenants is good for us. So we're very excited for UCLA and to welcome those fans to Pasadena and do what Pasadena does best of showing off this amazing city. We've hosted numerous events since we were last here. We had America Fest, which is our annual 4th of July celebration. Wonderful community event. Our Palomino Music Festival that took place on July 9th.
Yeah.
It just makes you long. You're like, I missed that.
Mr. Hampton.
You never know when.
Mr. Hampton got excited about America Fest.
That's funny. No, my phone went off of mute. Sorry about that.
All good, T. We also this past weekend hosted over 90,000 people for a Real Madrid versus Juventus soccer match that was a financial success, and we're still working through some operational challenges that we had. 90,000 people are a lot of people to welcome down to the Central Arroyo, and so we look forward to getting feedback from our residents and neighbors on how we can get better. But from a national standpoint, it was the largest soccer match hosted since the pandemic in this state, and we're really proud of that. And then we've also announced a few events that are going to be taking place since we were last with you. Mexico versus Peru will be on September 24th. And we announced a very exciting family event in partnership with Nickelodeon on October 22nd and 23rd. So really amazing ways to welcome the community down to the Central Arroyo. Today is actually the first day of operation of our new operator in our Brookside Clubhouse. So American Golf has taken over that management, and we're excited to have a new operator in there with new hours, a new expanded menu, and some improvements in that space. This also coincides with a new 2-year window for us to totally reimagine that space. So we're excited over the next couple of years to be able to have flexibility in this new contract to be able to go out and see what the local community thinks that clubhouse in that area should be. And then finally, we're very excited about on August 13th, coming up here in about 2 weeks, our Party of the Century. Our Legacy Foundation has done an amazing job. We're going to welcome over 1,000 people down to the field and celebrate our stadium's 100th birthday. And at the same time, announce some really, really exciting milestones around tens of millions of dollars fundraised through the local community for our National Historic Landmark. So many wonderful things that have happened since we were last there. With that, once again, I'm going to hand it over to Dan Barrett, who's going to go at a very high level over this presentation. We are not trying to skip any items, so if there's anything that council wants any more detail on, we're happy to go into any detail that you like, but we really want to keep as much time as possible for council to be able to speak through these 8 recommendations that came through the RBOC and make sure that we're headed in the right direction. So with that, I'll give it my time to Dan Barrett.
Thanks, Jens. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Yes.
Okay. Mayor, members of the council, thanks for the opportunity. Would like to also express my condolences to the Kennedy family. This is going to be one of my shortest presentations to you. Jens has instructed me to remind you what we went over in early June, but leave as much time open for discussion as possible. So we're going to just start with the table of contents or the outline. I'm going to go through at a very high level and then really open it up for discussion and any questions that you may have. As you may recall, we started with a financial overview discussion. We talked about the RBOC's operations prior to COVID, how the RBOC operated at a profit after debt service, after preventative maintenance and scheduled capital repairs prior to COVID. Obviously, the RBOC was significantly impacted by COVID, and the 5-year pro forma shows a deterioration of that financial position where the RBOC will not be able to cover in whole its debt service without dipping into its reserves starting in FY 2025. We then moved on and talked about the capital needs assessment that was completed by stadium and industry experts, including Gensler Architects, MER Engineers, DeRay Food Service Consultants, and MKA Structural Consultants, which identified over the next 6-year period a total of approximately $54 million in essential CapEx needs. And those are essential needs to continue to operate the facility safely. 8 million of that 54 million is currently funded, leaving about 46 million to be funded over the next 6 years. We then moved on into our market overview to talk about the competitive marketplace, which, as we all are aware, there's a significant increase in the level of competition in the Southern California market. But beyond that, regionally, as well as nationally, there's significant competition for major events, which puts more pressure on the economics of the building and its ability to host events. We also talked about some of the comparable facilities across the country and how the model in Pasadena is a bit unique in that the public sector partners, the city, county, and or states in many cases provide direct support for operations, CapEx, and debt service in many situations where facilities don't have an NFL or Major League Baseball tenant. We then spent the bulk of our time talking about the revenue enhancement opportunities and the study that was conducted there, essentially a 2-phase study that started with over 130 opportunities. That list was narrowed down to 94 to focus on those that generate revenues and can be part of the financial solution. And from that list, approximately 12 were identified to evaluate in more detail in phase 2. We also looked at ancillary opportunities or ancillary development opportunities within the Arroyo while trying to be sensitive to the challenges, the nature of the Arroyo, as well as the neighbors. We provided some examples of development, low density development opportunities in Central Park, Torrey Pines, Ojai, Yosemite as examples. And then we also looked at amateur or youth athletic fields and provided some examples there. Daryl Dunn then provided an overview of community programming efforts of the RBOC in the stadium. And then, as you'll recall, Mike Ross spent some time talking about the economic impacts of a couple events that were held at the stadium. And then we finished and concluded with some requests for recommended next steps for further evaluation and reporting back to the city. The presentation, although we didn't get into it at that time, included some discussion and examples of naming rights opportunities, some examples of athletic fields, and then also some return analysis on, I believe, 4 of the revenue enhancement opportunities. That's what the presentation included last time. When we concluded, there was not a lot of time for discussion, and I think I'll turn it back to Jens. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jens, to open it up.
Yeah, sounds good. And at this point, I think we would hand it over to the mayor to see how he would like to handle the remainder of the time here, but we wanted to leave as much as possible for dialogue.
Great. Thank you for the report. We've had this matter come before us a number of times, and I'm pleased to see the various opportunities that exist. One of the things that I do think we should look to is regional and state assistance. And one thought, and I've talked to Mr. Wyden about this, is something similar to the Mills Act. As we all know, in Pasadena, the state gives us an opportunity to help people with property taxes, people who have own a historic structure, a historic home. And I think there's an opportunity to say to the state, when we have a historic structure like the Rose Bowl, and I'm not limiting it to historic structures like the Rose Bowl. I'm suggesting that we look at all venues, even on a statewide basis, all venues that are historic, that are assets to cities like Pasadena and collectively to the state of California, and that are also generating income, again, for the city, for the state, and for the county, that we have something analogous to the Mills Act. And so I would ask that staff begin the process of identifying how we would approach the state, and I'll reach out to our legislative representatives. But when we have a historic venue like the Rose Bowl, or even the Coliseum or the Hollywood Bowl, that are publicly owned assets that attract hundreds of thousands of people, the Rose Bowl in some years in excess of 1 million people, that generate so much commerce in our city and tourism to the entire state, and I would argue certainly attention worldwide on New Year's Day and during the parade. We ought to have a Mills Act benefit, and some of our sales tax, like we do with the property tax in the Mills Act, some of the sales tax should be dedicated by the state and the county to supporting the economic engine and historic asset that is the Rose Bowl and others throughout the state. And so I would ask that we look carefully at that issue, that we reach out, and I'll reach out to our elected representatives, but that we really start doing some work on an issue like that. I think we'll find a lot of support with people interested in preservation. I think we'll find a lot of support in the business community who understands well that these historic assets can contribute greatly to cities and communities and to the state. And I hope we'll find success with the governor and our legislative representatives, because there is no more important venue on New Year's Day for the state of California than and beyond than the Rose Bowl. And I plan to reach out to the Tournament of Roses because I think we should also think about the parade and asking that the parade be supported by the state of California for all of the same reasons, in something again analogous to the Mills Act. So that and the citywide parking and tax are and the TOT are the items that I would like to see us work on. And with those opening comments and suggestions, thank you, Jens and Dan, and I'll look to my colleagues. Ms. Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. I have two questions, and then I'll follow up with my comments later if other council members have comments. But there's about $50 million of capital improvements that are in these strategic initiatives. What would be the source of those funds? Have we thought through how we would fund some of the capital improvements like the south end seating, et cetera?
So there's two different lists, and Dan can speak to it. But so CAA Icon came in and did a comprehensive analysis of our building and looked at things that needed to be done in the next 5 to 6 years, and that's that list. It's actually a lot more maintenance and items that are appropriate at this time of the stadium's life cycle. When it comes to other projects, so south end seating section or family golf as examples, the plan with those is if we get the direction that we are going in the right direction, is to work with our foundation Legacy to first and foremost identify donors that might be willing to do that. As this group knows, they're closing in on a $40 million campaign that we're hoping to announce here very soon that they've completed. So we would lean very heavily on Legacy, but what's becoming very apparent to all of us is that Legacy alone is not enough for us and all the needs that we have at the stadium. And so as we look at these solutions, whether it be a parking tax or some type of the Mills Act, those are items that we think are imperative just for us to go out there and to get these funds for these very important capital projects. So these additional opportunities are not included in that number. That number is just for the operation of the stadium. So anything above and beyond would be above and beyond that. Dan and Josh on his team can talk through some financing options. So we had them pull together what financing some of those items might look like to see if that might be a better option for us. Obviously, getting those funds from a donor or from another source is a much more cost-effective way to do that. But we have asked them to look at that as well if having that cash up front is going to be difficult for us in the short to medium term.
Thank you. And then the second question is, will we see an updated budget for this fiscal year that shows the impact of the Big Ten on the Rose Bowl, or do we know sort of financially what the impact is?
Yeah, so I can speak. So for these next 2 years, it's still to be determined. We actually think there might be a little bit of a lift for us because of the Pac-12 schools that are used to playing UCLA every year may look at these next 2 years as a chance for them to come back to Pasadena for what may be one of the last times. So we think we'll get a little bit of a bump there. We feel strongly that, especially in the first 5 years of the Big Ten coming here, that we're going to have a significant impact to attendance for UCLA games because you have a lot of schools and locales that haven't been here in a very long time. We're still working through exactly what that looks like with our partners at UCLA. We feel pretty strongly that hopefully is going to be upwards of $1 million a year annually for us if things play out the way that we think they will. But we're still tracking that. It's still pretty early. We once again are letting UCLA sort of work through this. We do have some time to plan for it. But in the initial returns, as an example, we sell premium seating for UCLA football. So our team answers all those calls, and we have quite a few clients that we're locked in for 3 years that are extending to 5, 7, and 10 years, which is a good indicator that fans and people are excited about this change. So we're very optimistic about that helping, and any of those would be above and beyond what we've shown to this council as far as what our projections are.
Thank you. So I think generally where I am, I appreciate all of the amazing events. I went to Palomino Festival and was directing traffic for a little bit of that until Jen saved me. But all of the events that you guys have done, all of the creativity with the events on the field, you guys have done an amazing job. I'm very supportive, which is why I vote for each of the displacement events when they come to us. I think the main concern that I have is when the PCOC or the convention center received the TOT back in like 1983. There was a full economic analysis done of the operations, and that analysis is what provided a direction for which public funding source was the best. So I think that we have an RBOC analysis of what is strategically best for the Rose Bowl, but I don't think we have a city or a city council analysis of what is best for the taxpayers and the citizens. So I think that's a piece that's missing here, and I would be supportive of some of the sort of non-capital projects, the alignment of interest in the contracts, the third-party improvements. I would be very supportive of that, but it would be very difficult for me to support capital improvements without knowing what the impact is on our general fund. And we could also, that economic analysis would include analysis of the bonds. I mean, when you really look at this, the elephant in the room is the Rose Bowl bonds. It's at 206 million of outstanding debt. And if a good friend of yours said that they couldn't afford their mortgage, you would probably tell them to sell their house if you were a good friend. You probably wouldn't tell them to build an ADU in the back and charge for that, and then rent this out, and then rent rooms out and Airbnb it. So we're kind of not dealing with the problem, which is the debt. There's about 180 billion of BABs out there, the Build America bonds out there. It's a big issue that different cities are working on to try to, I think majority of that, about 121 is non-callable like ours. That's a very typical structure for taxable debt. But I think that there are ways to look at how to restructure the debt, which is the problem. The problem is the debt. So I would rather try to solve the problem than sort of go around it or sort of plug the gaps in the dam and sort of hope that it doesn't break. I would rather just deal with the problem. So I think an economic analysis on the city side, driven by the city, would kind of show us how the bond structure could be addressed uh, and how the different public financing sources that would be optimal, that would provide a balance between the Rose Bowl having a stable revenue source and the citizens and taxpayers of Pasadena being protected. So I think that's just the big part that's missing for me. We have one side of it. I think the RBOC has done a great analysis of their options, but I would like to see an analysis of our options as a council. Thank you.
Well, maybe I'm missing it, but I think this is that opportunity. I guess the way I look at it, the difference here is, you know, you're right. If someone couldn't afford their mortgage, you'd probably tell them to sell. But unless you're advocating for the sale of the Rose Bowl, you know, I don't think that analogy applies. And actually, that was a question at one point. It was a question before the council. Actually, a couple of times, it was a question whether or not to essentially sell the Rose Bowl to the NFL. One of the reasons that we invested and we have these bonds is because the answer to that question was a resounding no, we're not selling the Rose Bowl. We're going to go to Plan B and invest in the stadium ourselves. That was a decision that we made as a community. In fact, it was the community first. It was members of this council, and some of us who were here, and then who debated it, and then it was a community initiative that said this place is not for sale. And you know, so again, not to belabor the point, but I don't think the selling of the house is an option. In
Well,
terms
a
of the
different form of sale is to outsource it to AEG or someone like that. And have we looked at that option lately? The Hollywood Bowl, they did that with LA County. So I think
Yeah.
that there are just some options we haven't looked at.
No.
And so that's why I'm concerned about going down a certain path when we haven't looked at all of our options.
I think, well, I'll let staff respond to that, but in terms of, and then with Mr. Masuda's permission, I'll turn to our first to Mr. Madison, our RBOC representative. In terms of the bonds, it's it's a question that's been asked and answered for a few years, if not longer. But let's turn to Mr. Barrett, or who would be the appropriate person, Mr. Barrett or staff? Can the bonds be refinanced?
Yeah, our understanding from talking with city staff and their financial advisors is that there's a make whole provision, and that there is not an opportunity to refinance those bonds and have any type of material savings from them at this. Well, this was some time ago before interest rate increases. So I don't expect that has changed, and if anything, it's probably gotten worse. But I think the city's CFO would probably be in the best position to answer that question directly. But we did ask the question to them when we were doing this work.
And these are city bonds, and so Mr. Hawksworth, you're up. I've heard you give this answer, but let's put it to rest or revive it. Can the bonds be refinanced?
I think Mr. Barrett accurately summed it up. They are callable bonds, but it's not financially advantageous to call them. Okay. So we would have to issue tens of millions of dollars in additional bonds at an additional cost in order to refund them. Mm-hmm. So that it would be a long-term net cost increase, even if the short-term interest rate was lower. So it's not, it is possible to call them, but we wouldn't save any money doing it. I know the one thing that we've looked at many times, and I suppose we will continue to look at it, is what occurs if the federal government were to eliminate the BABS subsidy completely. Mm-hmm. I do believe that if the federal government took action to eliminate the BABS subsidy completely, we would have additional options. But at this point, that's beyond our control.
At one point, we lobbied, is my recollection, for that. Do you recall, Dan, when
it was part of the sequestration process.
Thank you. It was part of the sequestration process. And at one point, the bonds, we were in danger of having to pay more, and we inquired about some of the suggestions that are being made today. Maybe we should attempt that again. But it's not for the lack of trying. The sequestration endangered us and almost cost us quite a bit of money. But certainly we can attempt that again. And so Matt, before you step down, so your original analysis, because I recall this question being asked when I was a member of RBOC. So how often do you review? No, I'm no longer a member of RBOC. I don't know, but how often are you asked by the RBOC to review these matters? And is it a rolling review? So if something changes, then in your analysis, and it becomes feasible to refund, would you let us know or inform the RBOC?
No, absolutely. As you, Mayor, and the council will recall, we have refunded several of the bonds related to the stadium in the past, and we certainly take advantage of doing that whenever we can for any of our outstanding debt. And we do continually monitor opportunities in the future to do things such as that. The last, what I would say, sort of deep dive or aggressive look at it was at the beginning of COVID, when we believed that the shutdown or inability to host large-scale events may have enacted some of the extenuating circumstance clauses in the bonds that would have provided some unique provisions. And in partnership with the RBOC staff and our city attorney's office, We did a thorough legal analysis to see if we could do something. And unfortunately, the conclusion was that we could not do something. But that's so within the last 2 years was the last time that we did a real dive into the actual legal language of the bonds and things like that to even look for provisions.
And one other question. Well, let me first turn to Mr. Madison, who's our representative. Then I'll have a couple more questions. Mr. Madison, and then
Sure,
followed by
Mayor.
Mr. Masuda.
I just wanted to point out that I think you're right. And Ms. Williams is right to raise the idea that, what are our options? And I think that is the point that we are finding ourselves tonight.
Yeah.
And, if you look at the staff report, there's a list of 8 or 10 potential directions to pursue. That list has been culled carefully by the RBOC and staff and the consultants from a much larger list of different options. And I can assure the council, because I sat in those meetings, that there aren't any silver bullets that have been overlooked here. The simple truth is we don't want to sell the Rose Bowl. We don't have that option of selling the house. And I think most families wouldn't sell the house. And, I think this is akin to the discussion that sometimes we have about, so-called unfunded mandates in government. I've got 2 sons. If I had looked at all the unfunded mandates that I had the day that they were born, I would have sold my sons, right? But you don't do that. And the reason is that just as there is a stream of future cost expectations out in the future, there also are revenue opportunities out into the future that we will advantage ourselves with. And certainly for Pasadena, I don't think any right-thinking person seriously would propose that we either shutter the Rose Bowl or try to sell it. And as you said, Mayor, very eloquently, we had that opportunity 10 years ago or so when we sent the NFL packing, because that's essentially the deal that was being offered. It wasn't legalistically a sale, but the idea was that the NFL would come in and solve our financial problems, but they would have custody and control of the Rose Bowl pretty much for 365 days a year. And then they would allow us to have college football on a few Saturdays and the Rose Bowl game every January 1st or January 2nd if the first fell on a Sunday. So, the Rose Bowl, the outlook is fabulous. Anybody that was there, 48 hours ago for this friendly soccer match that we had, I can't recall the exact announcement, but it was something like the largest crowd to see a soccer game this year anywhere. It was 94,000 people. I just wish FIFA had been able to sit in the stands and watch that game, because how they could decide to go somewhere else, is beyond me.
I did forward the headline to FIFA.
Good. I wrote an email also, but I deleted it, Mayor, which sometimes is the better part of valor. But I do think tonight what the council should focus on is which of these, sort of cafeteria options that the board has provided to us with Dan and his team's able assistance should we pursue, and which do we think aren't viable options politically or otherwise. But the simple fact is, the Rose Bowl is part and parcel of who we are as a city, as a community. It brings tremendous benefits to the city. And unless we want to walk away from that, we need to come together around a plan that, as Ms. Williams said, that is the best for the residents and the public fisc to be able to continue doing what we do there. So I look forward to that part of the discussion, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Madison. Mr. Masuda, followed by Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Jen and RBOC staff for your report. And congrats on the largest soccer event. I actually saw a lot of people driving on Colorado Boulevard in Orange Grove. And congrats again on the UCLA joining the Big Ten. On page 3 it talks about the fiscal 2022 operating reserve balance, ending balance projection has improved by 11.6 million. And then right under that, it says now 1 year later, the projection for the operating performa after debt service, preventive maintenance, and capital improvements, on capital expenses is a deficit of 11.7 million, a 14.8 million improvement. I think it sounds great. So is that true, Jen, right now, what I'm reading?
It is true, so we've improved significantly from where our financial forecast was even just months ago. We continue to outperform our budgets. The challenge is that we've found is that we are at a point, and the pandemic helped show this, but it was really happening before the pandemic, in that our building is celebrating being 100 years young, and that's an amazing thing to celebrate. But if you have a 100-year-old home, if we're sticking with our home analogy, there's quite a bit of capital that a 100-year-old home needs to be able to invest in it. That's why the state provides tax credits for the Mills Act and other reasons to try and get people to hold on to these beautiful homes so that they stay around for another 100 years. And so really that's the big thing that we're talking about. Councilmember Williams is exactly right. If you look down the road, the Coliseum is probably the best example or comparison that we have. They're 99 years old and we're 100. The difference is that they just did a $300+ million renovation that was 100% paid for by USC donors that donated to that project. We decided to go get loans and pay for that and have a close to $15 million bond debt payment every year. If we didn't have that, we would be in a very different situation. So really this is in our minds, not a case of what went wrong. This is a case of going forward, what things do we need to identify to have stable funding sources so that we and the residents and the people that live around the stadium and all the people that use the Central Arroyo have some predictable use and understand what is appropriate in that area. And so that we can make the right decisions, not just the decisions that are easy and that have the most money out in front of us. So you are correct that we have been performing through the pandemic and even this year better than planned.
Great. Do these improved projections change the strategy of the 8 revenue generating opportunities that are on page 2?
For us, they don't, mostly because if you look out to year 5, there's still significant losses expected, even if we were to, as we spoke of earlier with UCLA moving to the Big Ten, that's wonderful news for us. But even if that improved our finances by $1 million a year, it still has us in a place where we need additional funds. So from our perspective, we need to think big and think about other ways that we can find significant funds. And not just in Pasadena. We understand Pasadena is a city of 150,000 people, and that's very hard for a city of that size to support a building that almost seats that many people. We had almost that many people at our soccer match on Saturday. So what we have been focused on is talking locally here in Pasadena of what we can do, and then taking that story out and talking to the county and the state. Where our team is actually going up to Sacramento tomorrow to talk to the state because we've had some great success there. As was mentioned, when the Rose Bowl game unfortunately was moved to Texas, even our governor said there was the gold rush and then there was the Rose Bowl. Those are the things that brought people to this state. So there's people that are very passionate about this building throughout this country, and our plan is to show that we're stepping up and continue to. This council did that by covering our bond debt during the pandemic, and that was seen by the federal government and by the state, and that was illustrated by the $10 million we got from the federal government and the $3 million that we just got from the state. So our plan is to cast a very wide net, because this is a bigger problem than we can solve by just 8 items on a agenda report here.
Thank you. And my last question. We have 8 strategies here, and I think they're all outstanding strategies. Are you recommending that we do all 8?
Right now, what we're doing is we're making sure that, because all of these will require money to go study these and to continue to pursue them. And so before we go and spend more money on these initiatives, we want to make sure that we have some type of consensus on at least the ones that we shouldn't look at all, or some type of a priority. This list, as I mentioned earlier, was much larger. The RBOC did our best to try and understand what would be appropriate and what could work in the Arroyo. But before we go out and expend more funds on this, we wanted to make sure we had multiple stops here with City Council to make sure that there was no items that we were spending on that were not appropriate in the eyes of council.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Masuda. Vice Mayor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor, and certainly appreciate the conversation. And I love Steve's comment that the Rose Bowl outlook is fabulous. I would contend that maybe is looking at the Rose Bowl through rose-colored glasses. I do think we are at a different phase of its evolution. And, I think in 2011, when the community voted down the NFL, that was the right thing to do. And I think the RBOC and many people around it, including Legacy, have done a great job over the last 10 or 11 years. So I laud them for that. But I think Plan B has kind of run its course. So I do challenge us not to think about laundry list, but take the opportunity to think what the Rose Bowl and the Rose Bowl campus can be for the next 100 years. I feel like we're not being bold enough. I feel like this is a very laundry list set of activities. And I would challenge my colleagues in the RBOC to think, I think more holistically about where we're going. And I don't know that, state funds, and I love the Mills Act, and I think it's great for historic preservation. Perhaps that could help us with some of the maintenance with that facility. But I think it's overly optimistic to think that would kind of save the day. And I caution a little bit around, public funding sources, whether that be parking taxes or TOT. That is really, revenue enhancement to the general fund, and those are fungible. Those may be necessary, but I think we need to look at it, holistically for generating, incremental funds from, in particular, taxpayers. And I understand parking tax and TOT for outside parties. Those dollars could be used in many different ways. So I guess, and I think Jens, I hear what you're saying, and I think you're saying the right thing. I do think we need to pull our heads up. I think this work of opportunities is useful, but I really challenge us to move beyond a narrative of saving the Rose Bowl. I think it's just too short-sighted. I think we need to re-envision what the Rose Bowl is going to be and put this in a positive light. I think it's, not respectful to the Rose Bowl and our community to think that we can't be, forward-thinking enough to imagine, we had a Plan B, and I think that was bold, and I really think we should be thinking about in the next 100 years. And I know that's a part of your plan, Jens, and I guess I'm asking you all how we go about pursuing that, so we're not putting Band-Aids on this, and we're coming up with really a vision that can be exciting. It's something that, the residents and the state and the county can be excited about. I'm proud of our city, and I'm proud of the history of the Rose Bowl, but I'm not sure that this plan, at least as what I've seen so far, is aspirational in any way. I'd love to see something aspirational. Jens, I'm going to let you maybe respond to that.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Mayor. And as we've discussed, one of the things that we've tried to do through this process is widen the aperture a little bit to think a little bit bigger of what this Central Arroyo is. If you use our music festival as an example, when we went out and did our music festival deal, which we currently have, we now make $3 million a year on our music festival on 10 days a year. There's some load in, load out days, but event days, 10. Our golf course is doing as well as it's ever done, and will probably net close to $1.5 to $2 million. So on those 10 days, we're making more on that site than we do on golf. That's not to say that we want to get rid of golf. Golf's why that music site is so beautiful. But that's an example of how we thought differently. We didn't just think about our Rose Bowl Stadium and our 90,000 seats and what can we do in here. We thought about the site. And I think that's a really important thing for us to look at. And it actually goes to Councilmember Williams' question earlier about AEG and other partners. Really what we've found from those partners is they've said, we love your site, and we love that there could be a chance for us to do more there, if not be involved there. But really what they're looking for is the direction of this group and the citizens of Pasadena to understand what they feel is appropriate. Because if you're an outside group like AEG and you come in, it's going to be very hard for you once you take over to change the narrative of what you can do in this area, because it will very much feel like an outside group coming in and trying to do things that weren't appropriate when we ran it. So I think that this is a wonderful time to talk about what is appropriate in that area, because it not only opens up additional revenue opportunities, but it also opens up additional partners that might come in and help us invest in that area to actually make these things happen. So we welcome that look at the Central Arroyo and the stadium, and understanding what the next step are. And so I think this is the appropriate time and place to talk through those items. Really what you see in this list, the laundry list, is the RBOC is, we have rails that we try and stay within. As you saw during the pandemic, we were as successful as any building in the country. But we still stayed within what was allowed and what we were allowed to do in that area. So we really push it to the edge of what can be done down there in an appropriate manner. I think what we're doing now is talking about things that are out of our purview. Parking tax is not something that the RBOC manages and talks about. Same with TOT. Those other uses and thinking a little bit bigger are things that we would welcome feedback from Vice Mayor and others on what could be appropriate down there while reimagining the Arroyo.
And I think, we have not just obviously the Rose Bowl, but and the golf course, but the aquatic center and kids space. I had a conversation with the president of the kids space, and she's, really eager to think about the campus. I think we have lots of people who come down there for kind of singular use rather than destination use of let's spend a day in the Rose Bowl and go to kids space and have lunch. And I do feel like we have lots of people coming in and out. But we think we don't really market this as a destination for people to do multiple activities. And I just mentioned, whether it's Frisbee golf, horseback riding, there's so much great stuff down there, but each of those audiences is kind of dealt with in isolation. And I'm kind of wondering whether there's a way to kind of knit that together into, destination Arroyo, right? Could have, I spent the weekend in Manhattan Beach, hang out at the beach and spend an overnight there and had a great time. I can imagine, and I've had a lot of great times at the music festivals. I just feel like there's an opportunity here, and it's kind of looking us in the face, but we have to kind of pull our heads up and think, a little bit more broadly. And I'm not talking about, building LA Live down there. I'm just thinking about what is the Arroyo, what is the campus? How do we put that together in a way that this is kind of a compelling regional destination as a whole? And my guess is if we did that, I don't know if we'd cover the entire gap, but I have a feeling that we could attract new partners and generate some revenue that would allow the Rose Bowl in the Arroyo to be responsibly used for our own residents, but also as a regional asset. So I just don't want to lose that opportunity. I think it's in front of us and it's necessary. So I'm keen to see how we can pursue that. And I would ask that we give you and maybe the new city manager some leeway to think about that strategy more broadly.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I don't want to jump the queue, but I just, what's frustrating to me about the Vice Mayor's comments, which are clearly well-intended, is, axioms and slogans don't really help too much. So to talk about the best interests of the taxpayers or to think holistically, I mean, we really have looked at specific options, everything from a band shell like the Hollywood Bowl or the Greek Theater, where we would have 200 music events a year. We've looked at things like a 12-story hotel down in the Arroyo. We've concluded that those are non-starters politically because of the fragile sort of ecosystem that the Rose Bowl exists in the middle of beautiful neighborhoods on all sides. If this council feels differently, tonight's the night to tell us. But it's not helpful, Andy, and I mean this in the right way, and I hope you'll take it in the spirit that it's given. It's just not helpful to say, no, let's go back and think more holistically or outside the box, because we've done that, and there are not a lot of uses for a 100,000 seat stadium. And beyond that, we're dealing with the Arroyo and the surrounding neighborhoods. So if you have a sense of some more specificity, I'd love to hear it.
Well, I mean, we have a tremendous amount of surface parking lots, which are, used sporadically. And I look at the dual use of the golf course. I just think, we've looked at projects, but, I don't think we've kind of thought about what that can be. We've looked at ideas. I can idea 30 more ideas, Steve, and I'm not suggesting we build a hotel, a 12-story hotel, but maybe the lodge or the clubhouse could be a little bit more of a lodge and create some connectivity so someone could come from Riverside and spend a weekend with their family, or a corporation could, have conferences there, and we could, figure out how to connect the dots. And what I'm not talking about is we don't have a blank slate. We have a lot of great pieces. And I think it's a little bit of a collective vision of saying, what are we trying to be? Like the family golf may be great, but is this kind of a family destination? Maybe we should be pushing a few other activities so it's clearly the place for families, or is it entertainment? How do we want to brand that destination, right? Then looking at that as a framework to kind of fill in the projects, because a little bit of my concern is that if you look at projects independently, just purely on their financial returns, you could end up with, we've seen bad architecture, right? I built a bathroom and then I added a family room, and you end up with a really bad piece of collective. It's not a building that you respect anymore. It's kind of a mishmash. And what I feel like a little bit of this umbrella of what is the future of the Rose Bowl campus and the Arroyo, and which projects fit in there. And does that move the needle? Because I think there's kind of a multiplier effect. It's not going to save the day, but maybe it could. I don't know. So I think a lot of these activities have been well analyzed, but the kind of layer above is how do we integrate them so that they're feed on each other, so that there is a destination. I could go visit 5 things and spend a day down there with my family rather than just riding a bike on my own or going to kids space, or I'm a swimmer. I mean, we all know people who use the Rose Bowl. I'm really interested in how many people use multiple things in one visit. I guess it's pretty, my guess is it's pretty small. That's what I'm thinking about. And once again, I think the CIA work is great, and I'm trying to integrate it together so that we have a collective of what the future of the Rose Bowl is that they're all excited about, that we can rally behind. It would help with fundraising and help with partnerships. None of these things on their standalone feel that exciting. They feel a little band-aidy. And maybe this is a packaging exercise, and maybe that's what I'm challenging the Rose Bowl to do under the next step is what is the integrating kind of umbrella of how we're going to be as exciting as SoFi is for football. How can we make the Rose Bowl and the Arroyo as exciting for X? Fill in the X. What is the X? That's what I'm looking for, because I do think it will really help in terms of partnerships and ultimately generating incremental revenue opportunities. Because I just want a mishmash. I mean, it's kind of like, what did you guys do? Well, this seemed like a good idea. We did that, and this seemed like a good idea. Then you start boxing yourself in, and you don't end up with something that I think could create the regional impact that we're all hoping for. And I maybe missed that in all the analysis that I've seen.
So SoFi is exciting for professional football. The Rose Bowl is exciting for college football, and that's what we're grappling with. But let me just say, I tend to agree with Mr. Madison, and I don't disagree with you, Mr. Wilson, the picture, but your comments, we can't conflate what I hear you say is reimagining the Arroyo, and that's very different and a very different charge than we've given to the RBOC. We've not said to the RBOC, reimagine the Arroyo. We've said to the RBOC, let's bring us some solutions that are within your jurisdiction and your control. And that means the Rose Bowl campus, which is, the chain link fence around the Rose Bowl and the golf course. The conversation that you're suggesting, and I agree, it's a conversation we ought to have as a broader community to see if we want to reimagine the Arroyo. I think you're going to get a lot of people who say, I'm not going to reimagine the Arroyo because the Arroyo is a beautiful, natural, unique, open space. But that's a conversation we can have.
I think, with all due respect, Victor, reimagining doesn't mean changing the physicality. I think it's a function of how we market that and how we position it in a landscape that has changed.
I don't.
So don't kind of twist. You're assuming there's something radically different as a physical layout, and I think we can. We haven't put our marketing hats on, and that's what I feel like we're missing.
No question. But that's not the charge. The charge and direction to the RBOC is very specific.
Well, and maybe
It's
that's
not,
my
it's
point.
not, yeah, it's not, yeah. So I think that's a different conversation. I think it's a conversation we should have, but we can't say to during the Rose Bowl conversation, you've not done that, because
Well,
that's not their
well,
responsibility. I think it just conflates the issues, and,
But I think
because
part of this is,
I recall, if I can just wrap it up, Andy, I recall, not too long ago in 2017 or so, when the discussion at this council, and you'll recall it too, was to limit with absoluteness, put a hard cap on the number of events at the Rose Bowl. And the push at the time from my predecessor and others was to limit it to 15 events at the Rose Bowl. And that was going to be it. And I recall Mr. Madison and I and the Rose Bowl operating company members and staff saying, we will be lucky to have this number of events again. I think the number was 21 or so at the time. And we will be pining for the days when we could have that number of events and that much excitement and electricity at the Rose Bowl. And here we are.
I
And,
guess,
and
I
so,
hear that. So what is the implication of?
so if I can just finish, Andy. So I do think that we should look very closely at what is under the jurisdiction and control of the RBOC. That's what they're bringing to us, and give them direction. And then we should bifurcate the discussion on the broader planning for what is a very important and open and a part of our open space plan, to see if there are other opportunities, not just to generate revenue, but to enhance the experience in the Arroyo for the various users. And as a part of that, think carefully how we market the enhanced Arroyo, if in fact we come to a conclusion as a community with a public discussion that we want to do that. But for now, what we've asked the RBOC to do is to come back with us with matters that are within their jurisdiction, within their control, and give us recommendations. And now they're asking for our direction. I think separate and apart from that, because they have no jurisdiction over the broader Arroyo, we should take us in action to have that public discussion about the broader Arroyo and where opportunities to improve, generate income, and or enhance the activities, understanding that it's a very important public space. It's a natural space in the middle of a neighborhood.
And I guess
A couple of
my
neighborhoods.
point is, and I agree with that. I think what you said is correct. And this is not a critique of their work. I'm just saying, I feel like the opportunity to, it's like, and I'm not suggesting this is a mall, but you have they're the anchor tenant in the Rose Bowl, but it is a very rich and diverse ecosystem. And we've kind of said, think about how you're going to be successful, but you can't think we're not giving them leeway or not, that we haven't kind of engaged the adjacencies effectively. So I feel like it's kind of a missed opportunity. This is not a criticism of the analysis they've done, because I agree with you, they've done exactly that. I want to caution a little bit that if you don't want to box yourselves in, like if there is kind of a more compelling holistic narrative, and you kind of, the anchor tenant goes down one route, that you may kind of box yourselves in from doing something that kind of serves a collective, opportunity. So that makes sense. You kind of start down one route, like, hey, well, we'd be better off doing X, and we have to back up. So I just think it needs to be reconciled around what could be a way to kind of bring the whole Arroyo together, is what I think is an extraordinary place. And, there are a lot of great activities going on outside of what is in the campus of the Rose Bowl. And I don't think we have fully engaged in that opportunity.
Yeah, but I just want to make sure that the public understands clearly. The city limits the jurisdiction both physically and in terms of activity of the Rose Bowl operating company. They do not plan for the Arroyo. And so they're limited in what they can do or recommend to us. Now, we want to give them that jurisdiction and say, go plan for the Arroyo, come back to us. I'm sure they would welcome that opportunity.
I don't know.
What I'm suggesting is that we have that discussion separate and apart as a council, because I do recall the days when I was there, and I've got the war wounds to show, when when people would say, you are not taking any RBOC activities outside of that chain link fence. No Rose Bowl activities outside the chain link fence. Now, I think as a community, we've learned that, hey, there's opportunity and it can be done responsibly. But I'll tell you, I was there when I was president of the RBOC and recommended the Music and Arts Festival. And it was a packed Civic Auditorium Gold Room. People were at the RBOC meeting calling for my resignation, saying you're taking activity outside of the chain link fence. You are going outside of your jurisdiction. And so I caution us to not forget the lessons of the past, and also to recognize reality. They are limited to a jurisdiction, a physical plant. The discussion outside of that jurisdiction belongs here at the council chambers, sure, in consultation with the Rose Bowl, but it belongs here in the council chambers and with the public in an open forum with all of the city's representatives.
If that's a motion, I'm going to second it. But that's what I'm
Yeah,
suggesting.
yeah.
I'm saying I feel like we've kind of, and we know we've learned from the music festival, which I would tell you has been a great success. And now I think we need to think about what we can learn. And I think, kudos to, AEG and the RBOC for executing that away where people are comfortable with that as a successful pilot.
Yeah.
But now how do we take that information and work with the Rose Bowl and the other, we're the landlord for all the Arroyo. Like that's our responsibility, that's our charge to think about that as a broader canvas, because I feel like we're kind of trying to make the Rose Bowl save the day on their own is putting them in a situation where they're, not going to, I'm concerned they're not going to succeed.
Yeah, well, it's again, that's the responsibility of this council, not the RBOCs. And I welcome that, and I'll think through with the city manager how we bring that discussion forward. Again, together with the public, and trying to strike the delicate balance that Mr. Madison is reminding us of. That that was the whole press for the Music and Arts Festival, and some of us in this room and online may have lost a year or two of our lives trying to convince people that it could be done responsibly, and it has been, and that's what's given credibility. And I think in the community's been very understanding that the RBOC is not the second coming of the evil empire about to take over the Arroyo and their neighborhoods, and that they can enhance activities in and around the Rose Bowl without completely disrupting. And it's not, there is some disruption, but the communities come to understand and trust the management of the Rose Bowl and the RBOC, and I think we have a responsibility to maintain that. And so I do think we have to separate the jurisdictional issues, the charge given to the Rose Bowl, and then take ownership ourselves of that broader discussion together with the public.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, just on that point, if it's okay, just by chime in, that's what originally the One Arroyo, when it was originally presented to us, was going to be this czar of all of the Arroyo morphed into working on a trail project. And I've mentioned that multiple times as a representative of the Rose Bowl, but also a representative of the Arroyo. We do need to have, as Vice Mayor has mentioned, that one kind of central location to look at the Arroyo as a whole. And I'm hoping that we have that conversation in this council, and we actually make something out of that, because the Vice Mayor makes solid points about,
the presentation that was presented today and what I see in the packet, but very grateful for the Rose Bowl and this, and the work that they did do though. So that's it, Mayor. Thanks for letting me chime in on that point, but I do want to see that as a full-on discussion about what's going to happen. And even if it's a task force of the council, I mean, we have to really look at the Arroyo as a whole.
Thank you for the reminder, Mr. Hampton, and that, you know, the One Arroyo discussion was headed in that direction. It was to give jurisdiction to, essentially give jurisdiction to a group of people who were appointed. And the question that I had at the time, and the concern I would have today, is, you know, that's a very, I'm not sure that that's a responsibility that we want to delegate to any group in terms of having that authority. It was based on a model in New York, the Central Park Conservancy, but that morphed over 30 years. I think we have to be careful about ceding or delegating jurisdiction and responsibility that we hold as a council. I think the initial discussion maybe happens here at the council together with the public, or maybe first in the public, and then we begin to think about opportunities. Let me think it through with together with the city manager, and we can identify a process.
Thank you. I was only mentioning that, not to be defensive, I was only mentioning the One Arroyo is originally the conversation was about we're reimagining, relooking at, not just imagining, but having a look at the Arroyo as a whole. And it didn't turn into that. It turned into something completely different. Not taking steps to Rose Bowl or yourself or anybody. I was a part of those conversations. And I was really supportive of the idea. And then when it came back to us and turned into something, of course, I, you know, stated what I thought it was going to be, what the community thought it was going to be, and it was not that. I do think this is, you know, definitely a council level discussion because, and I wouldn't want to give that authority over to just some sort of community group or anything like that, but really, you know, leave that authority in the council's, you know, under the council's purview. But, you know, I do just remember that's what it was supposed to be, and it just never turned into that. And so, you know, having a real look at it this time around and saying, this is what we're going to do with more direction would be great.
Yeah.
So that's it, Mayor.
That was the debate at the time, whether we have we create yet another appointed body. Because remember, the RBOC, I mean, guess what? We've met the enemy and it's us. We appoint the RBOC members. And, you know, I use that tongue in cheek, of course. I don't mean the real enemy. But, you know, we appoint the RBOC members. And so what I said at the time, and I'll caution us again, so, you know, creating yet another body of an appointed body when we already appoint the RBOC. And I questioned it at the time, you know, should we have the RBOC look at it? And the push at the time was, no, we don't trust the RBOC. Now we want to give them the Arroyo. But you know, let's be thoughtful about it. Let's think it through. The points are well taken, but I do caution us about some of the issues that we identified in the past. And truly, at that point in time, it was nobody wanted to give any more jurisdiction to the RBOC. I should say nobody. Some did not. And now we're saying plan for the Arroyo. So let's think through a process to have a discussion that includes the public and keeps, at least for the time being, it may change, jurisdiction with all of us who are the elected representatives citywide.
You're twisting what I'm saying, or at least maybe I'm not.
You're the third person that's accused me of that tonight.
I'm just saying, I'm not understanding exactly your responses to the thing I'm trying to say is the council needs to have a real discussion, as Vice Mayor has included, the council about what the Arroyo, having our city manager, city leadership part of, you know, the RBAC, the RBOC, the kid space, everybody who are the users, you know, kind of understand
what all the users are. That's where we were going. That's where the One Arroyo was supposed to be, right? And it was supposed to be, at least I thought it was going to be, back at the council level. All I'm saying is we need to really have that discussion this time around and not turn it into we're going to make a trail that already exists.
Well, we actually had, when we had that discussion, we made a conscious decision to not give jurisdiction and to have them focus on projects. But I get your point. Maybe we revisit that question, but at the time we did make that conscious decision. So we shouldn't say One Arroyo didn't do what they were charged to do. We limited their charge. At the time, we made a conscious decision to not. And I would say, and believe me, I have a great deal of respect for every member of One Arroyo, but I think it was the right decision to not cede or delegate that jurisdiction for planning of the Arroyo to a non-elected body. That's the argument I made then. It's the argument I made today. Oh, Ms. Rivas?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief. Just as to the eight proposals, I don't think that there are any at this point that I think need to be eliminated. I'd be happy to support any or all of them moving forward, and I appreciate hearing everyone's perspective. But there's one that I haven't heard raised today, and I don't recall anyone raising it back on June 6th. So I'm going to take a wild guess and assume it doesn't have much support, and I'm not crazy about it either. I'm not a big fan, but I do think we should keep the naming rights on the table. I think that's the only option, because it's the only option that will immediately bring in a substantial amount of revenue without taking on more debt. So, be clear, I'm not ready to say let's do it. We all saw what happened with the Coliseum and United Airlines and that mess. But I don't think we should completely eliminate it and continue to explore that and potentially other similar naming rights that could potentially bring in revenue. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, happy to. So,
Mr. Wyden, do you respond?
Yeah, on naming rights, it's a topic that's in the news and it will consistently be because stadiums are being renamed as we stand here. We have a history in this world. As you all remember, we came to you and we named our field after a private donor, and we had a thorough discussion about how appropriate it would be to name our stadium and other areas. And at that time, we made the decision that naming our field after a donor was appropriate and that we didn't want to go down that road. However, as our financial challenges have mounted, we did go back and we looked at both stadium naming and campus naming. Stadium naming is something that not only is something that we have to take very seriously and council has to take very seriously, but it was contemplated in our agreements with our tenants. So there is approval rights for our tenants in that is specifically the Tournament of Roses. And there's a lot of assets that go with stadium naming that just don't belong to us because of our relationship being a landlord and a tenant. So what the RBOC and this sort of is the right place to have this discussion, but the RBOC at the RBOC level, based on that, the fact that we could not control that and that it would be very expensive for us to pare down all those assets that we would have to, in theory, buy back from our tenants, we made the decision in this list here to present campus naming, which we believe is in our control. And after the deductions that we'd have to take on a stadium naming rights is not too far off from what the net would be for a stadium like us. It's hard to take a step back when you see the huge numbers that are out there for Crypto.com Arena or a new NFL stadium. You have to keep in mind that the only assets that we own are our marquee and our long stem rows. We don't own the Tournament of Roses assets. We don't own the UCLA marks. So a lot of those things that go into stadium naming rights go along with 300 concerts or shows at Crypto.com Arena. And based on the amazing events that we do, we had an outside group called Elevate do some research for us. And based on that research, the RBOC made the decision to recommend campus naming rights, which our partner Learfield, who currently pays us about $3.5 million a year, which is one of the highest payments for any standalone college stadium in the country, is excited to go out and potentially market that. But we wanted to get direction from council on that initiative. But if that stadium naming rights is something that that council wants us to go back and look at, we're happy to take that back to the RBOC and talk about that. But we felt that the campus naming rights was more appropriate for us to spend our time and monies on to understand what that would look like.
Yeah.
Quick follow-up question, because in the appendix from the last meeting, I didn't see anything about Elevate studying the campus naming rights. Did they look at that, or is that something they'll look at moving forward?
Yeah, we had Elevate study that. It's not in the CA report, but we're happy to, as part of the notes on this meeting, we're happy to send that out, the Elevate study on stadium naming rights. We're happy to do that.
Oh, sorry, I meant specifically campus naming rights, because the report from last time included stadium naming rights, but not campus.
I'll defer to Dan, I think, maybe on that one. Dan, if you want to talk about campus and marquee.
Yeah, we were the ones that worked on the campus naming rights, Councilmember Rivas, and I don't believe that Elevate specifically looked at campus naming rights and sponsorship opportunities. I think they were solely focused on the stadium naming rights, if I'm understanding the question.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for clearing that up.
Sure.
Remind me, the field naming rights, we had to reopen the agreements with UCLA and the tournament to accept the contribution. And what was the contribution for the?
It was $10 million
Yeah.
Private donor donation, yes, and that required approval from the Tournament of Roses and some approvals from UCLA.
Because of our contractual agreements with them.
Correct.
Not because they have any ownership. And we did debate back and forth the stadium naming of the stadium. Was that a part of that? Why? Go ahead. That's been debated.
Yes. So what we did is CAA did a very thorough report, as you've all seen, and that includes campus naming rights. We had Elevate, who's associated with Learfield, who's our rights holder now, do the evaluation on stadium naming rights. So it's done by a different group. That's probably why Councilmember Rivas made that clarification that it's not in the CAA report. It's actually in the Elevate report, because they're our partner that's on property that's currently selling for us. So they were able to go into market and better understand what that could look like. And so there were two separate reports, one done by Elevate that just was stadium naming, and then CAA had campus as one of the items they studied, and it's one of our short lists here.
I recall as we were looking for things for revenue opportunities like the music festival, that we had the discussion, and I remember the value of the stadium naming rights at the time was off the charts. I don't want to quote a number, but I want to say it was 30 million or something. Again, we'd have to go back and look at that. But I'll tell you, colleagues, you know, I don't know that we would receive a whole lot of support in the community for that. That was the pushback on renaming the Rose Bowl Stadium, you know, whatever stadium, was tremendous. And, you know, I was one of them. I don't know that that's the appropriate step for the stadium itself, and for the city. Anyway, so I think we have to be careful with that. And, you know, this is again we're back to, you know, we're of two minds on this. That could be, to Mr. Madison's point, a small silver bullet. I don't know. Well, at the time it seemed like it, but it's not one that I believe this community would support, or that even I could support. The renaming of the stadium, even if we didn't have the contractual limitations.
Yeah, in Elevate's most recent report, based on some of the limitations that we have, their estimate was just under $5 million a year annually. One of the challenges, though, is that many of the assets that they felt needed to be included in that stadium naming rights included billboard signage on a major freeway or major freeways, paint on the field, which we don't control, to put the corporate logo on the field, and then in and out of TV. So when you come in on TV, you say the XYZ Rose Bowl, that all those add into that number that they evaluated, all of which are out of our control. Because the number wasn't high enough, that once we deducted the cost to buy those things, and there may not even be a cost to buy them, in defense of our tenants, if you look at the Tournament of Roses, their biggest revenue stream is presenting that game based on someone, and that is the Rose Bowl game presented by, and there's a brand associated with it. So if you imagine going into the intro of the Rose Bowl game presented by Capital One at the XYZ Rose Bowl and it starts to become a mission critical problem for them, because that is their number one through 10 funding sources is that naming and how ESPN sells that. So it is a major issue for them, not one that they would withhold because they don't want to help us, but because it is their core
Yeah.
business.
Makes sense. 5 million a year is nothing to sneeze at. And so, but I get the points that you're drawing out, and it does remind me when we renamed the field, that was one of the issues that limited the value of the field from what we thought we could get. Is we couldn't say to to the market, if we name the field after you, we're going to zoom in on your name, because we don't control that. The television stations or companies control that. And they would prefer to see their advertisers, I'm sure, as opposed to, who's benefiting the stadium that they don't own. And so same issues as before. Ms. Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. And I do, I get what Vice Mayor Wilson is saying. It's a little bit hard. These initiatives are out of context because we don't really know what our end game is. I mean, the end game is to make money for the Rose Bowl. I get that. But without having a strategic vision and sort of, is this going to be a family-friendly area? Okay, then let's do family-friendly things. It's a little bit out of context. And so, so that was kind of the way I read Vice Mayor Wilson's comments, and I agree with him. I think it's difficult at this point because now we're kind of in a financial bind and we need to come up with solutions. So I would be inclined to support the recommendation if there was a prioritization. So if we could prioritize those things that don't require an expenditure of capital or the incurrence of debt, if we prioritized so I would say it's 2, 4, and 8 would be kind of the non-capital ones, if there was a priority on those. And I would look at, I think it's these Roman numerals, man. Okay, so I think it's 6 and 7. I would look at it as an economic analysis done by an economics firm like ERA was the one that did the PCOC. But if it was an economic analysis of public financing sources, including your Mills Act, the parking tax, we don't have on here the ticket tax, which the member of the public brought up again. What are our options? But what are our options there? I think we need to know that. So I would be supportive of us focusing on those things that the RBOC can do immediately, just within their current context, and then having an analysis of kind of all of the funding sources that would be available that would be most appropriate for the Rose Bowl, including the TOT and other things. How would that look with us sort of being one of the highest TOTs in the state? So I could be supportive if we prioritize those things that did not require an investment of capital. And then maybe add to that the strategic portion, how to put Vice Mayor Wilson's concern about the strategic portion into sort of a council direction to be able to look at that.
On the ticket tax, so those are contractually limited. Why don't you talk a little bit about the contractual implications there?
Yeah, for the most part, our ticket tax
and practical implications.
Yeah, so UCLA is an example on our ticket tax. So UCLA, when they signed their long-term agreement with us, rightfully so, they needed some security and some understanding of what they were walking into for decades. Built in that if our ticket tax goes up, their rent goes down by that number. So the ticket tax on UCLA doesn't really net us any more dollars. Really, the most practical application that I can try and explain is on our ancillary events, our soccer matches and our concerts. So really in that world, we go out and we try and get business. As we mentioned, we're in the most difficult market in the country when it comes to getting that business. And what we've done is we've done sort of a two-pronged approach. We've had a relatively low ticket tax. So we agree with you that the ticket tax seems at the onset, especially with ticket prices and all the fees that get added onto a ticket, it seems like $1.91 doesn't seem like that much. But that's actually in a lot of cases good for us in that in addition to that ticket tax, we also get a license fee when that partner comes into our building. They pay us a guaranteed fee to come and use the building. It doesn't guarantee our profitability, but it gives us a wonderful head start. Some of our competitors in this market and in the country have a riskier approach. They don't charge a license fee. Instead, they charge a ticket fee, which is usually around $5 or so or up, and that is their rent and their ticket fee. And so if the event doesn't do well, they have some major exposures because they didn't really have that head start on the license fee. So for us, we've been very successful, as the mayor mentioned, when we were here a few years ago and SoFi Stadium was being built. We mentioned that going over 15 probably wasn't a reality for us, but our team has worked really hard to try and attract outside events. Our music festivals helped us immensely because it gives us a 10 event head start when we open the year. But we have been very successful in attracting those events. So we would just caution any changes there. And that's why it actually wasn't recommended here. Not that we can't go back and look at it. I think that's good feedback of looking more globally. But as the RBOC looked at it, we outlined why that fee as it is right now has been beneficial to us, and that it's additive to our license fee, not something that takes away from and has those promoters come to us and say, you have to choose either or. You either do a $5 ticket fee or a license fee. You can't do both. Otherwise, we'll just go to another building. So it's been helpful for us there. And that's really the business that we need the buttons on the phones for, where we go out and get that business. And a lot of our tenant business, they built that in, that some structures to try and give themselves some predictability on that tax.
Do phones have buttons?
They do. They used to. They're touchpads, I should say.
Okay, so any follow-up, Ms. Williamson? No. It's a complicated web when it comes to these revenue sharing agreements. Let's see, Mr. Madison or Vice Mayor Wilson, were you next? You were next, I see.
Right, Steve can go. I'll go for Steve.
Mr. Madison.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the discussion because a lot's been said already, but I mean, I do think the context is that, historically and economically, the reason a town of our size has a 100,000 seat football stadium is pretty apparent. It's because of the Tournament of Roses and this, globally famous event that we have every New Year's. And I think we collectively, and the RBOC gets a lot of credit for this, have done well, given that football stadium is nestled in the middle of highly engaged neighborhoods of residents. I'm not aware of another stadium in the country that has that feature, as well as it's in a natural open space environment that has clearly been designated for family recreation, not in the nature of sort of an urban park. And, if you look up and down that central Arroyo, it's all about family recreation. The aquatic center that was mentioned, the tennis courts, Jackie Robinson Baseball Stadium, Kids Space, which was mentioned, the Loop, which every day, and I maintain every day of the year, at every hour and minute of the day, you can find somebody using that loop, biking, running, walking, what have you, the soccer fields around the bowl, the golf courses that we have there. And I think we've done a terrific job in adapting that now to accommodate kind of not only UCLA, to now have a long-term relationship with UCLA, but also to involve music, these music festivals, which fit perfectly into the idea of family recreation in an open space, in particular the music festival. I think we will always welcome, the right act that can fill a 100,000 seat stadium, but those acts are few and far between. And we've had the best of those over the years, the Stones, U2, on and on, but there just aren't that many opportunities. So I think, to me, the context is clear, and it would be terrific if this were really a clean slate and we didn't want to have New Year's Day or college football, and we've got long-term contracts that require us to, and we want to. That's what this is all about. If we didn't want to have open space, that might be another story as well. But and unfortunately, those constraints really bring us back to a limited number of opportunities, which we should vigorously pursue. And I'm not sure that you can limit it to those that require no capital, because the ones that require some capital may be ultimately the most profitable for us and the best options. But those are my comments, Mayor. I don't know if we have public comment on this or how you intend to bring this discussion to a conclusion, but.
Yeah, let's, Mr. Wilson's still in the queue, and then we'll turn to public comment.
I mean, I totally hear what Steve is saying. I think the reality is that's all fine and dandy, but we're, looking at an income statement that shows, $5-6 million of operating losses, and a stadium that needs tens of millions of dollars of repair. It's like having a house. It needs to be taken care of. And I think the question really is, how we fund that. And I think it's a balancing act. I'm definitely don't want to ruin the the Arroyo. I think we want to protect the Arroyo, but I think there's a way to be creative and kind of knit the pieces together so that we have a place we all can be proud of that, maybe softens a little bit of the financial burden. Maybe there's some multiple strategies, but I do feel like contextualizing the whole Arroyo under, once again, when Arroyo, I was concerned about it, felt like meddling in something that was kind of working. I mean, it's great. So they're doing a trail. I mean, I think we now need that type of thinking. I think, Steve, the financial circumstances have changed, that just like a plan B was the right thing 10, 12 years ago. I think we need to acknowledge that the landscape has changed, and come up with a strategy to, thread the needle. I think that's what we're talking about. And I think we need to do that in not just the context of the perimeters of the Rose Bowl and the golf course. I think our asset is the whole Arroyo, and we need to respect that. But I also think we can creatively make it better. I mean, I don't know, when I'm walking, I kind of wish there was a great place to have brunch. It's like after my grandparents go swimming, they wish there was some place, that they could hang out. So I do think there's a way to kind of complete the picture that will make the destination more compelling. And I believe fundamentally that will help also close the economic gap. I don't know the answer to that, but I think we owe it to the community to try to figure that out. And that's really the challenge I'm issuing. I know that it hasn't been the charter or the charge to the RBOC, and I think we need to figure out how to get that done, because I think it will be informative into what projects also fit into that bigger canvas that take place at the RBOC. So some of these don't require capital improvements. So I see where Councilmember Williams is going with that. It still leaves us some leeway. So I'm comfortable with that direction that she's laid out as well. But I'm eager for a public comment. So I will stop there.
Thank you. I would be, again, we've made conscious decisions in the past to limit the jurisdiction in where the RBOC could go mining for opportunities, if you will, in the Arroyo. And so I don't want to limit in this case and repeat those mistakes by limiting the opportunities that they bring to us based on our need to invest. Sometimes you gotta, spend money to make money. This may be one of those situations. I'm confident it will be. And it's always been that situation. That's why we went to Plan B. That's why we entertained and then fortunately said no to the NFL first and then went to Plan B. That's why we pursued the Music and Arts Festival. And it took some time. I mean, we knew that in 2021, I'm sorry, was anticipated. Jen's remind me, the original pro forma, Dan, you may be the person for this. The original pro forma, when we floated the bonds, showed or started to show economic challenges right about now. Am I correct about that?
Well, I think the circumstances, kind of across the board, Mayor, have changed the whole outlook of what the pro forma
No, but the original,
called for. Yeah, and when we originally issued the bonds, it was stabilized, and there were challenges because the debt service was
Right.
going to be growing over time.
Right.
That was always going to be a challenge, and there were going to be risks that were understood at the time of the issuance of those bonds, for sure.
and so this was not a misunderstood investment. We knew that we needed to move quickly on the BABs. We knew that there would be some uncertainty in terms of attracting events. We went to the community and said, give us a chance to bring more events. And that's where the pushback was. The pushback was, well, no, there were others who said cap the number of events at a hard 15, meaning even the council couldn't change it. And we knew that as the debt service went up, there would be challenges. And actually, the pandemic has sped up and exacerbated those issues. But it was right about now when the debt service started to go up that we all knew and anticipated that there would be challenges. And here we are. What we didn't anticipate for was the complete well, I shouldn't say complete shutdown, but the challenges and shutdown issues surrounding COVID, or that came with COVID. But I
so
would
Mayor,
caution us about artificially limiting the opportunities that they can come back to us with. Because remember, these are projects that we would even the capital improvement investment that would come back to us in some form or another for approval.
I didn't say limit, I said prioritize, which is
Yeah,
different.
okay,
It's,
fair
so,
point.
I mean, I think
Fair
that's,
point.
that's
I
sort of
think-
my compromise is,
I think
yeah.
I think that's a fair point,
Yeah.
but again, I want to give flexibility, maximum flexibility, and that's consistent with what I'm hearing to the RBOC to come back to us and make recommendations that based on feasibility, based on available resources, and based on maximum return on investment.
Based on our current financial situation, we will be coming back here before we spend any significant amount of money, so we can promise you that. Yes,
Mayor,
no,
if you're
we're happy to
comfortable-
prioritize them. I think from our perspective, those are very appealing to us because, as I mentioned, because of our financial situation, ones that don't require capital are much easier for us to pursue. We do have a handful, Family Golf as an example, that we've started the environmental process. It's actually going to go out to the public here in the next month or so for their feedback on the project as it is. So there are some that are going out, but the actual capital to build them would be something that, as was mentioned, would go through approval from the RBOC on a capital plan and then would go to the city for approval as well. So we're not looking for any funds to do any of these projects. Really, the next steps here across the board is to further study these projects and understanding the prioritization. I think we're in alignment there. We also like the ones that don't require the capital up front.
Mr.
Mayor, I
Madison?
was just going to suggest, if helpful, I'd be willing to move the staff recommendation. And I would just, two comments. One is I would ask the RBOC to prioritize those initiatives that are most feasible and most likely to raise revenue. And then when they come back to council, we can decide whether the capital expenditure, if any, is necessary. I'm not sure I see many among the 8 that require significant capital anyway. And then the second thing is you made the point early on, Mayor, we all have an appointee to the RBOC. It would be difficult to imagine any group, in my mind, any group other than the RBOC having a 360-degree view of the right way to proceed down there. So, probably a discussion for another day, but rather than forming some new body and then having to figure out what the rules of the road are, I think perhaps we just need to give clearer signals to the RBOC about the mission, incorporating the comments that were made tonight. But that's my motion, Mayor. The recommendation that's before us in the staff report.
Ms. Williams? Oh, but yeah, we could have public comment. Mr. Madison, I'd ask that you, I don't know if this is needed, but that we incorporate the Mills Act concept as something that should be included to be pursued.
Certainly, Mayor.
And the other ones, well, the TOT and parking tax are already.
They're on there.
Yeah, thank you. Public comment?
We have 4 public speakers, beginning with Sonia Burnt, followed by Nina Chomsky, followed by Geoffrey Baum, and concluding with Joe Shook. Before I call the name for the first speaker, I'd like to report out that the city clerk's office received 2 letters expressing concerns with the severe impact the Rose Bowl's debt has had on the city's financial resources and the lack of urgency exhibited to address the matter, and advocating for the needs of the Pasadena residents to take precedence as the city council weighs options for the Rose Bowl operations. 1 letter advocating for the preservation of the Arroyo and urging the city council to further rethink how the Rose Bowl Stadium is managed and operated. 2 letters expressing that any possible change to the Rose Bowl or the golf course should be carefully evaluated in terms of not only their income generating potential, but also to the impact on the valuable historic resources, noting that the Rose Bowl, Central Arroyo, and the Brookside Golf Course and surrounding area is listed together as a National Register Historic District. And 1 letter urging the City Council to consider eliminating the cap on the Rose Bowl admission tax, even if it would require a ballot initiative. And with that, I'll turn to Sonia Burnt. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Please commence. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. The January 1st, 2022 guest opinion in Pasadena Now, authored by Mayor Gordo and Councilmember Madison, states in part that the Rose Bowl defines us as a community and we must financially support it. The opinion ends with the question, quote, Pasadena's would not have it any other way, would we? Unquote. Have council members posed that question to the over 500 unhoused residents of our city, nearly 300 of whom have no shelter at all? Have you posed it to all the renters receiving eviction notices or all the residents who are priced out of living in our city because there is seriously inadequate affordable housing here? Do they agree that we must continue to pay the Rose Bowl debt and fund its capital improvements at all costs instead of providing critical services that benefit all of our residents? The Rose Bowl does not define us as a community. The people in our community and how we treat them are what define us as a community. The issue of the dire financial situation of the RBOC and the $21.5 million of Rose Bowl debt paid from our general fund and reserves have been flying under the radar. But more community members are becoming aware of these problems. We are counting on the City Council to urgently act and make tough decisions that would be the best for our entire community. Hope is not a strategy, and trying to get new legislation passed is certainly not urgent action. On the renaming the stadium, actually Elevate said simply for the stadium naming rights was $4.2 million per year with a long-term deal of $48.2 million. The package that Mr. Wyden was referring to was the one for 4.7 to 5.0 million. The mayor has stated that there wasn't previously support for renaming the stadium. Ask this question to our people. Do you want to rename the stadium? Are you opposed to that? So that we don't have to raid our general fund and reserves? Then the people of this city want to have services. We don't want to deplete our general fund resources. Anyone who says there is a fabulous outlook on the Rose Bowl is being disingenuous and misleading the public. And finally, the RBOC's fiscal performance improvement was mostly one-time funding this past year. The city would have had to pay on the debt this year, but for the one-time federal grant. And this is the truth. You need to start speaking the truth to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on to Nina Chomsky. Nina, can you hear me?
Yes, Nina Chomsky, speaking on behalf of the Linda Vista Annandale Association with a personal comment toward the end. We submitted our letter and we appreciate the comments of Vice Mayor Wilson, because we do need to think holistically. But we also need to think about what we're doing in the light of the fact that the Rose Bowl is an irreplaceable, Central Arroyo, natural open space area. And our board feels very strongly that whatever we're doing, we must preserve Central Arroyo. And so what do we think about that? We think that we must limit commercialization and theme parking. And what is the worst of this list of activities for that, particularly theme parking? Particularly it's miniature golf. Now you can upgrade the driving range to some extent, but the miniature golf is going to change the entire character of the area, and also back up to what we really do think you should focus on, and it could be a focus for the Central Arroyo, and knit together all the activities in the Central Arroyo, and that's to upgrade the clubhouse, to redo that entire place there, maybe start over. There is no reason that cannot be one of the top locations and destinations in all of Pasadena as an entree to the Central Arroyo and everything that goes on in the Central Arroyo and the entire Arroyo, including the improved trail system from one Arroyo. So what would we ask you to do? Forget miniature golf, get out of that whole idea and focus on some of the others, collecting taxes in one way or another. Working on things that do not degrade ultimately the Arroyo. And here's my personal comment. How dare we move to issue an entitlement process, that's the CEQA process, to move forward with family golf. I had spoken to the mayor previously to try to stop that, or at least put it off. You can put it off until there is public review. In fact, public review of this entire list. There has been very, very little public participation about whether any of these is any good. There's no discussion of the RBOC. There's no real discussion at our neighborhood meetings. We need real public review and public discussion, including miniature golf. And miniature golf is of great concern to WPRA and LBAA. Do not issue CEQA entitlement documents and call on us to review them and then fight them because you are getting an entitlement to approve all that before you have really gone through the proper public process. That is not the thing to do. So I would ask you to prioritize, to look at what costs money, to pick how we can make money earlier rather than later. That would be some of these tax ideas.
Ms. Chomsky, can you please conclude your comments? Your time has run
I
out.
would also ask you to pay attention to historic status on the South seating project and read and understand the comments from Pasadena Heritage in that regard.
Thank you. Thank you. We're moving on to Joffrey Baum. Joffrey?
Good evening, Mayor Gordo, Vice Mayor Wilson, City Manager Kurtz, members of the City Council. My name is Jeffrey Baum, and I'm speaking on behalf of the West Pasadena Residents Association. We are an all-volunteer organization serving and representing 7,000 households across West Pasadena. First, we want to extend our congratulations to the RBOC and Steve Hadeline, who I saw earlier, on the selection of Jens Weiden as the new CEO and General Manager of the Rose Bowl. Together with his colleagues George Cunningham and Deedon Brazino, we know they will be strong partners with the families who live in the neighborhoods surrounding the Rose Bowl. There are multiple proposals suggested in this budget item that will have a significant impact on the Arroyo and the surrounding neighborhoods. And I've got to confess, there is a great deal of apprehension in the community over these, and there hasn't been significant or meaningful neighborhood consultation with things like the Family Golf Center or signage or others. They will increase traffic or light pollution, noise, or they will introduce commercialization that will detract from the natural beauty that makes the Rose Bowl and the Central Arroyo so distinct. So we call on the council to make sure, and I saw there will be quarterly reports to insist that there's meaningful neighborhood consultation. And it's not just presenting to the neighbors, it's asking the neighbors what they would like to see and how they can be partners in this effort, because we are all very proud of the Rose Bowl. We're very proud of the Arroyo. We treasure this community, and we want to be partners with the City Council, the RBOC, and the entire community to ensure we have this wonderful, we continue this amazing legacy for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will conclude with Jill Shook. Jill? Hello, Jill, please unmute.
Yes, I've unmuted.
Thank you. Please commence.
Yes, I like this idea of reimagining the Arroyo with limited access to archery, fly fishing practice, kid space, and events that would really create a destination for family reunions. This is happening now all over the world, and not with the idea at all of a theme park, but of a family-friendly place, which already it is in many ways, just expanding upon that. So we need to keep all ideas and on the table. And it's exciting to think about the many upcoming events happening. Recently, my husband and I were given $500 tickets for the Palomino Festival. And it was astounding to us to see how many people came that had paid that amount. And that wasn't the highest amount. There was other tickets that were twice that amount. And so I think we really need to look seriously at ways to tap into those ticket sales. Additionally, some of those that have moved to the area knew the neighborhood that they were getting into, that there would be periodic traffic and sound as a part of regular rhythm to their life. So I'm wondering if some kind of instead of a citywide bond, something that would do some kind of a neighborhood improvement district where those that live there could pay into a fund to help keep it afloat. So I just think there needs to be so many more options to really explore. My father played football at the Rose Bowl, and when he was in high school 70 years ago, and before that was long before I was born. He had the image of a place with gates of gold, and so now we need to leverage that reputation and turn it into real gold, and not shoot down good ideas for fear of past challenges, and really think about making sure we can spend money around where we really need it in our city, around those most in need, and not taking care of debt at the Rose Bowl. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes public comment on the matter.
Thank you. Mr. Madison, as our representative to the RBOC, did you have any final comments, or I believe you made the motion. You made a motion.
Yeah, Mayor. Yep.
Mayor,
Yes.
I have just a final comment as it relates to the TOT and the exploration of potentially raising the TOT. I just want the council to know that the PCOC is here and willing to help in any way we possibly can. I think tomorrow morning we'll have a conversation with the city manager about some potentially a capital increase that could help the city visitor center as well as the Rose Bowl. And so I just wanted to make sure that, with this motion that Michael Ross will be consulted as we're talking about potentially increasing the TOT.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Hampton. I do think it's important that we, this is the proverbial water balloon. You squeeze it one area and it bulges out in the other area. And so I think all of our, that's the benefit of a public process. And I do think that our partners, PCOC, should be a part of the discussion. So as we have those discussions, and particularly because It affects hotel room rates, everything. Is that a second, Mr. Hampton?
That is a second.
Okay, thank you. So with those comments, we have a motion and a second. Ms. Williams?
Thank you. I guess I'll appeal to our representative on the RBOC. I still, just hearing the public comments about need for more community outreach, comments from the council about being strategic and having partnerships, I still am not comfortable with the capital projects having the same priority as the non-capital projects. And so it's just a final appeal to Councilmember Madison, if he'd be willing to amend the motion to prioritize the non-capital projects, and just in favor of having more community outreach and analysis on the capital projects, just given their impact on the historic nature of the arroyo, the sort of desire to keep the arroyo natural. I think there's just a little bit more discussion and analysis that I think needs to be done for me to feel comfortable that those projects are consistent with what we believe the arroyo is.
Well, so for example, the seating project in the Rose Bowl, you would defer that or deprioritize that? That's extremely important.
Yes,
for-
and we also received a letter from Pasadena Heritage expressing concerns about the historic nature of the stadium and the impact of that particular project. But it's, when you look at it, I mean, these projects are $50 million and we net about $4 million a year in revenue from these projects. They're a very big investment and a very small amount. The TOT increase would probably cover most of that. So I think it just makes more sense to focus on things like that, the parking tax and the TOT, than to focus on things and kind of take the longer term with those other things so that we can do the proper community outreach.
Yeah, again, I think the council has the discretion to modulate the timing of these things, but I don't want to take to impose some constraint, which is somewhat vague anyway, on the RBOC. There are 8 specific projects plus the Mills Act would be 9. I'm only seeing a couple here that would require any capital at all. So I think there's a natural prioritization there anyway.
Well, there are 4 projects that would require $50 million in capital. It's a lot. That's just the size of their CIP.
Which 4 are you referring to?
The Family Golf Center.
Yeah.
Let's see here. The signage, the 210 freeway signage, which is also has an issue with our sign ordinance. So I think we kind of need to think about that a little bit. And then the South End seating project.
I don't think the signage is a capital issue for the Rose Bowl per se, but
Well, I think they'd have to build the signage, right? That's would require
if
capital.
they had a contract to do that, then
Yeah.
those funds would be provided. But I don't know. I'd like to see if the council would support. The RBOC has clearly heard your comments and all the comments. I'd like to see if there's support for the motion.
Thanks.
I do think that, I mean, look, some of these concepts all of them will require council action. The signage is a perfect example. It does require amending our sign ordinance because billboard types signs are prohibited at this point in Pasadena. New ones is my recollection, particularly the electronic ones are prohibited. And we prohibited those, I recall, as part of the Arts Center discussion on Arroyo. But that doesn't mean that they can't go out and do a feasibility study, and we would, say yes or no. I mean, we're not approving projects, and I want to be clear about that. This is not the approval of projects. This is direction to the RBOC. These are the areas where you believe action can be taken, maybe an investment made. Go investigate them, and then come back to us and tell us what you found. At that point in time, we can make determinations as to whether or not we want them to continue to pursue them, ultimately resulting in contractual agreements and then dedication of resources if needed, and projects. Projects is at the end of the entire process. So, I want to again caution us about restricting the RBOC's ability to pursue options. We may not support one or any, but I do think this broad direction is appropriate.
Well, I think I would have agreed with you if I hadn't known that they were already doing environmental review on mini golf. I think that was a surprise to the community as well as to some of us. So it seems like some of the projects are moving forward without council really giving direction to do the environmental. So that concerns me a little bit. And I think that's what the public was saying, was that they didn't really have time to prepare and review.
So on
Dennis?
miniature golf, so I guess two things. One, I think from the staff side in the RBOC, what I'm hearing in this motion is that none of these items are being taken off the table, which is helpful to us because there is some overlap when it comes to these projects. So as an example, when we talk about talking with our tenants about reworking our deals, some of these seating projects may be part of that dialogue. So if we have the ability to talk about all of them, that helps us as we sort of navigate these different areas. And the point being is that we are not going to get to a point where we're going to spend any type of capital work on these until we go back, we get our capital approved by our board, and then that goes through council as part of the capital budget. When it comes to the public process and making sure that the public is engaged, we have had meetings with the golf community and with our neighborhood groups. The challenge is it's been a while. So we met with them probably close to a year ago and have since been in a rather slow process to get this environmental document out, which the next step in this is public review. So I didn't want that to come across as we've gone through this whole process and we're going to say, this is what we're going to do. We're really in the next month or so going to get out with a document that we are, the actual phase is public review and feedback. So we're going to have the public look at it, look at what light spillage could be, look what it could look like, and get their direct feedback. And that is something that we've been very clear with our board. And we actually, as we've presented to council over the past probably 2.5 years, even before the pandemic, family golf was actually one of the things that we had on our list that we said we were going to pursue and engage a firm to better understand what the impacts could be. But your feedback is duly noted. We're not going to ignore the fact that we had two major associations that are very important neighbors to us that called out that they want to be engaged in this process, and we will do that. We will engage them in this process as we have done, and we'll continue to do that. And family golf is an example of that hopefully in the next month or so, we'll be able to sit down with them and talk through that, whether that's a one-on-one about that item, or if the RBOC and this council feel that that bigger meetings, as was discussed by Vice Mayor about the Arroyo and what's appropriate to not piecemeal it, we're happy to be part of those conversations as well.
Yeah, we've had the discussions on family golf a couple times, and I myself have cautioned the RBOC about pursuing that as an option because it wasn't my first option, but we'll see what the public environmental process reveals, and then what the return on investment might be. But I myself have cautioned the RBOC about that particular project. Mr. Wilson, Vice Mayor Wilson.
Yes, Mayor. I kind of feel like we're talking a little bit out of both sides of our mouths in the sense that I do think I don't want to waste the time of the RBOC. Like if there are things that we think are, not viable, then we should, get them to focus their energy on the things that we are likely to support. I think my guess, and I want to put words in Jen's mouth, but if we want to chop things off, that's probably helpful now versus allocating limited resources to things that we're unlikely to support, rather than just saying, well, let's see what it is and we'll come back and see if we want to fund it and kill it then. So if there are things that we think are, not palatable, it would probably be helpful to kind of guide the RBOC in that type of feedback. I would ask, Steve, was part of the motion to direct the city manager to work with the mayor to work on a larger or broader view of how do we envision what the most effective use and kind of vision is for the broader Arroyo, or is that not part of your motion?
Oh, I'm fine with that. And of course, we have a new city manager starting this month. So, but I would think that would be sort of a natural. I'm happy to append it to the motion.
I think it's important so we can at least start with the same, basic principles of, who is, is it just a community local park that we really don't want outside? I mean, we could say that. I'm not saying that's the right answer. Or we really, that it's, we want to have this be a big destination and become, I just think some of that narrative is important to guiding the RBOC and frankly, the other uses. And I know the Aquatic Center, you probably know, is thinking about what their expansion plans are. And so is Kid Space. And if we don't have any guiding principles of what we want to have there, I think it's going to be very difficult for these organizations to make any progress. And I do think we want to make sure that they're using their resources in the most efficient way possible. So I do think that helps not just the RBOC, but all the users in the Rose Bowl. So I'd ask that we kind of make sure that happens.
Certainly, although I would want to include the RBOC as part of that discussion.
Oh, no, of course. No, I'm not suggesting, but yeah, of course it would be. I just think there are other players as well that would benefit from having that work done. So if that's an amendment, then I'd be supportive of the motion as well.
And I would also say with regard to the sort of non-starters, believe me, there's a long list of things that were left on the cutting room floor that aren't part of this report or the motion. So I think what's before us are all serious proposals. They ultimately may not have traction with the council, but they warrant next steps given the challenges we have and the constraints that we've talked about. So well, thank you. I would take that as a second, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I'd be happy. I thought you had a second.
I think Mr. Hampton seconded it.
Oh, pardon me. Thank you.
I accept it.
You accept. Thank you, Tyron.
Yes. Yeah, this was a very, very long list initially. Okay, there's a motion and a second. Again, not a, I often tell people the Rose Bowl is a tremendous asset, but it comes with a tremendous burden too. And I think that's what we're experiencing today. But certainly, we have a responsibility to protect the Rose Bowl as it's an important asset to the city of Pasadena. But also, I think the state and the county have, and frankly, our private businesses who pay or collect parking tax and collect TOT have a responsibility to support it as well. And so we'll be calling on many of our business partners, will be calling on the state and on the county as well to do their part. And I'll certainly I'm glad you reminded me, Jens. I'll certainly be reminding the governor of his quote, there was the gold rush, then there was the Rose Bowl. Because I think he's absolutely correct about that. And the greatest beneficiary of the gold rush, well, except for the individuals, but, governmentally, the greatest beneficiary of the gold rush was the state of California. And I think that's the case when it comes to the Rose Bowl. I think the state benefits tremendously from the Rose Bowl stadium and the Rose Bowl game. And the state and the county have a responsibility to assist to ensure that it continues to be a protected historic asset that is also an economic engine, but exists and is located in a beautiful parkland in the middle of a neighborhood. That's the delicate balance and the challenge for all of us. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Public comment? One public.
What we do, but are we going to vote on this item?
Is there one more public comment?
Yes, Nina
No?
Chomsky.
Okay. Oh, matters
Yeah,
not on the
not-
agenda. Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Thank you, everyone. And roll call.
For the motion, my understanding is to pursue and the recommended opportunities that are most feasible and most likely to raise funds, including the Meals Act concept, included, which I'm not marked, so I didn't get that, including the vice mayor's comments related to the Royal area, which I will have to defer to the recording to get verbatim.
I think we got a broader discussion that that needs to frankly be had about the future of the Arroyo.
Mayor, can I ask that we like set some time frame certain to come up with kind of at least an approach?
January 1st of 2020.
I would ask that we do it before December
Oh,
12th.
oh, okay. I was gonna say, I didn't want to be too obvious. We'll do it before December 12th. We'll just kick it off.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And with that, I'll call the roll. Councilmember Hampton,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams,
No.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
Yes.
Mayor Gordo.
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 in favor and 1 against.
More to come. Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Thank you to Mr. Hatterline, Jens, and your team. Mr. Hawksworth for your work. Everyone. I know this is a complicated matter and we'll be seeing more of it. Okay, now one public comment for matters not on the agenda. Ms. Chomsky?
Hello, Nina? Nina, can you hear us?
Yes, now I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please come in.
Okay, yes, Nina Chomsky for the Linda Vista Annandale Association. I wanted to put on the record what went wrong Saturday night. I know you all know what went right, 94,000 people, tons of money, I guess a great event, but what went wrong? And it wasn't the kinds of things that we get criticized for, that people think we're so elite about, noise or our quality of life, noise, other forms of sound, light spillage, all that kind of stuff. No, it was traffic and parking. It was a nightmare all around the Rose Bowl, all up and down South Orange Grove, all in and out of all the side streets on Linda Vista and across the Arroyo. I heard from people over and who are friends of mine who live in East Arroyo about the traffic. There was, I don't know who was managing it. It wasn't apparent. It was a terrible problem. It's not about being elite or our quality of life or whatever. It was about a terrible public safety problem. Now, were we about to have the wildfire of the century here? Well, due to the humidity, maybe not. But the next time we have one of these games when 90,000 people turn up and there is absolutely no management that I could foresee of the parking, of the traffic, of controls over the illegal sale of merchandise in the middle of the street on South Orange Grove. I was exiting the city at that point, driving down, and I could see them running into the street and stopping the traffic. And I thought we got rid of that years ago. I thought we got rid of it on Linda Vista. There were people around selling parking illegally and diverting funds from the Rose Bowl, but slowing down the traffic so that it couldn't move. And when I came back at a 7:45, I couldn't move on South Orange Grove. So I got off and got over and got onto the freeway and went and came up through La Cañada, Flint Ridge and back down, where I found all kinds of parking in the Inverness area after we had been promised that we would have parking controls on these narrow streets. It is a wildfire, public safety, earthquake, disaster, potential disaster. And we spent 20 years figuring out how to do this. We couldn't get the money and the funds to manage this from the people promoting the soccer. These are the richest sports people in the world, and they couldn't provide us with money. And I guess there were some police, and I guess there were some people somewhere, but I couldn't see it. And I think that we just have to face this and figure out how to provide neighborhood protection so you can have these big events and make all the money that you expect to make. But Saturday night was not a proud operational success in terms of traffic and also parking. So I wanted to put that on the record because you are the people that are ultimately responsible. And thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Ms. Chomsky.
Mayor,
Mr. Hampton?
just to follow up on the comments of Ms. Chomsky, I personally was out driving the freeways, every event. I typically drive all of the areas, even as low as south, at least all of my district, and then I also drive down into Vista. I agree with the comments of Ms. Chomsky. I do have to say that, you know, given the fact once again, this has been one of the first events that has had a number, over 90,000, probably even in all of California, of a sporting event that has had that amount of people. And so this is the first event back from COVID. So not trying to give any excuses, but I do have to say that, you know, as we have talked about staffing and shortages and funds, things like that. I know that typically the Rose Bowl has between, 3,000 and 3,500 people working any given event. At this event, I think they were shy by 1,000 people working the events. And, so I did talk to the CEO of the Rose Bowl, and he said that come Thursday, they were looking at, or this week, I'm sorry, looking at increase in wages for those that do the protections of our neighborhoods and things like that, so that we could, try to get more people back to coming to work and doing and fulfilling this work. If that doesn't change anything, of course, traffic patterns will change. Also, one other thing that I just want to mention, and this is for you, Mayor, and also Steve, Councilmember Madison, as looking at when does CHP decide that they're going to close off freeway entrances and exits? I know that we're probably not extremely privy to that information, but I think it'd be really helpful to know what the criteria is so that we could at least explain that to the neighbors, because there were a lot of freeway entrances and exits that were closed. Like Arroyo was closed for the time being, Orange Grove closed down. I'm sorry, Walnut closed down for a little while. Mountain was closed for a hot second. So there was a lot of traffic. And then also the game plan around trying to, explain to people, park at Parsons and other facilities and bust your way in, because there's got to be some way to incentivize, that. And I know that the Rose Bowl is doing all that they possibly can to incentivize those type of things, but the neighborhood protections are definitely something that we have to look at. And I've already committed to my neighbors, as well as the Rose Bowl, that I'll be talking to them after the neighborhood meeting to figure out what happened to the plan that we previously had, and what significant differences were, and what happened this past weekend, and how do we adjust that even if we don't have the numbers. So hopefully we get back to 3,000 people working an event. But if we don't, we just have to pivot and create events that not only bring in revenue for the Rose Bowl, but also protect the quality of life of the residents that live around the Arroyo. So thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to bring that up.
Very, very good points raised by Ms. Chomsky and you, Mr. Hampton. And I'm certain Mr. Madison got the same earful that I received. Mr. Cunningham.
Good
wanna
evening,
respond?
Mayor.
Okay, brief.
Okay, good evening, Mayor, Councilmember Hampton, rest of the council.
I just wanted to address a couple of the points. Tyrone, there is a set attendance limit that CHP works with our Pasadena Police Department and our event operating teams to engage on shutting freeway signage and control of on and off ramps. And that threshold set with CHP through the state agencies, not just for our venue, but for all sporting venues, is between 70 and 75,000. So we did meet that threshold on being able to shut down ramps. And then on the points that were given on the challenges with traffic and neighborhood and staffing, as Tyrone mentioned, as our CEO brought up to him, we do have an item going towards our board to work with our staffing agencies on more labor cost increases, as well as we are addressing many different ways to on the staffing shortages. And then we will be working with our outside defense line operation teams to come up with different ways to manage the traffic if we have these type of shortages again. So planning that we don't get there.
Be great maybe if we have just a memo. We're constantly trying to refine it, and if we would do things differently, and what the challenges might be with the workforce in terms of having people, it'd be great to hear about that, maybe in a memorandum from the RVOC.
Not a problem. We'll bring something forward.
Okay, I think that, and you can send that to the entire council. Anything else? I think that completes our public agenda and public comment. And now I would ask that we, in adjournment, in honor of our friend and colleague, John Kennedy, who contributed greatly to the public debate, never shied away from public debate on Rose Bowl issues or any other issue, and always enriched the quality of the debate and the quality of the outcome that we ultimately came to. And so in honor of our friend and colleague, John Kennedy, I ask we stand and adjourn in his memory.